Hello everyone, I'm the Creeps Cabin. I know you use these videos to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. It started as a favor from my cousin. He just bought a cabin up in northern Idaho, some remote patch of land surrounded by forest, a half-hour drive down a single-lane gravel road. The place had no electricity, no cell service, and the only running water came from an old hand pump by the porch. He was in the middle of moving his stuff in and couldn't take off from work, so he asked me to house sit for 5 days while a plumber came out to work on the pipes and check the well. I wasn't doing much that week, and honestly, I liked the idea of getting away from the city for a while. I figured I'd bring some books, a camping stove, some cans of food, and just relax. I liked the quiet, or at least I thought I did. I got there on a Tuesday morning, just as the sun was warming up the road. The drive-in had already made me feel like I was on another planet. No signs, no fences, no cars. Just miles of trees and this narrow, bumpy trail of rock and dirt that kept going until I finally saw the cabin tucked into a small clearing. It was small and simple. One bedroom, a kitchen, and a living space, all wood, with a wraparound porch and a metal roof that looked newly replaced. There was a note taped to the door from my cousin. It had the plumber's number, which wouldn't help, given the lack of service, where to find the key, under a flat stone by the steps, and a reminder to pump water into the tank for washing dishes and flushing the toilet. I unlocked the door, hauled my bags inside, and started settling in. The first day passed without much to mention. I read a little, ate chili, took a short walk around the property. I spotted some deer tracks near the tree line and a collapsed hunting blind about 50 feet into the woods, nothing unusual. I slept early that night, since there wasn't much else to do after dark. The air was cool and fresh, and the stars above the clearing were some of the clearest I'd ever seen. It was the kind of silence that city people forget exists. No cars, no planes, just the wind in the trees. The second day started fine, too. I made coffee on the camping stove and sat on the porch, watching a squirrel tear apart a pine cone. The plumber was supposed to come sometime that day, but he never showed. I didn't worry about it. Out there, a missed appointment probably meant his truck broke down or he got stuck behind a fallen tree. That's the kind of place it was. Things moved slower. I took another walk that afternoon, a bit longer this time. I went deeper into the woods, keeping a general sense of direction by noting landmarks, large rocks, fallen trees, anything that stood out. The forest was thick, but not impassable. I followed a narrow animal trail for a while until I came across something strange, an old rusted-out pickup truck sitting in the middle of nowhere. The body was eaten up with rust. The tires had long since disintegrated. Moss grew along the hood and roof, and the driver's door was missing completely. The interior was stripped bare. No seats, no dash, just metal and decay. It looked like it had been there for decades. That's when I realized something that made the hairs on my neck stand up. There weren't any tracks leading in or out. No path wide enough for a vehicle. No flattened grass. Just forest, dense and unbroken. I stood there for a while listening, but there was nothing. Just birdsong and the occasional creak of a branch. I took a few pictures on my phone, even though I knew I wouldn't be able to send them until I got back to civilization. Then I turned around and headed back. I got a little lost on the way. I wasn't worried at first, just annoyed with myself for not marking my route better. I wandered for maybe 20 minutes before I saw something familiar, the remains of that old hunting blind. From there I got back to the clearing without any more trouble. That night, something felt off. It's hard to explain, but the air seemed different, heavier. I kept looking out the windows like I expected to see someone out there. I locked the doors even though I knew there wasn't another person for miles. I told myself it was just the isolation getting to me. City nerves, thin walls, and too much silence. I lay in bed for hours, not really sleeping, just listening to the creaks of the cabin and the wind against the walls. Somewhere past midnight, I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a soft, steady crunching, like footsteps on gravel. Slow, measured. They stopped right outside the window. I didn't move. My body went stiff. I didn't breathe. I stared at the ceiling, heart hammering in my chest, waiting for the sound to come again. It didn't. After what felt like hours, I finally moved. I got up, crept to the window, and looked out. Nothing. just the empty porch and the line of trees beyond. I convinced myself it was an animal, a deer maybe, or a raccoon, something looking for food. Still, I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. The third day, I tried to shake it off. I forced myself to go about the day as normal. I chopped some firewood, made breakfast, and even took another walk, though this time I stayed close to the clearing. I didn't want to risk getting turned around again, but I kept thinking about that sound. The way it had stopped right outside the window. Not passed by, not moved on, just stopped. Around mid-afternoon, I noticed something else. A tree near the edge of the clearing had bark scraped off in long vertical lines. Not claw marks exactly, but deep gouges, maybe from a knife or some kind of tool. It hadn't been there before. I walked over to get a closer look. The marks were fresh. The exposed wood was still pale, not yet dried out or discolored. I looked around, trying to spot anything else out of place. About 10 feet away, hidden in the brush, I saw what looked like a pile of stones. Someone had stacked them deliberately. Maybe 6 or 7 fist-sized rocks, arranged in a neat little cone. It didn't look natural. I didn't touch it. I just backed away and returned to the cabin. I didn't go out again that day. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with a flashlight clutched in my hand, listening. The cabin creaked. The wind rustled. Normal sounds. But around 1 in the morning, I heard it again, the footsteps. This time, I didn't freeze. I got up slowly and moved to the front window, crouching low so I wouldn't be seen. I peeked out. At first, I didn't see anything. But then, just at the edge of the clearing, I saw movement. Something, or someone, was standing there. I couldn't make out details. Just a shape. Upright. Still. Watching. I blinked and it was gone. The next morning, I packed. I know I was supposed to stay 5 days, but I didn't care. Something was wrong. I didn't want to be there anymore. The plumber never came, my cousin wasn't answering messages, and I was done pretending everything was fine. I threw my stuff into the car and got ready to leave. But when I turned the key, the engine wouldn't start. It didn't even click. Dead. I popped the hood, checked the battery, looked fine. Tried again. Nothing. That's when I noticed the hood latch. It was unhooked. The hood wasn't fully closed. I hadn't opened it. Not since arriving. I checked the battery cables. They were loose. Not just loose, unscrewed. As if someone had deliberately disabled the engine. My blood went cold. I fixed the cables as fast as I could, tightening them by hand. I jumped back in the car, turned the key, and this time it roared to life. I didn't waste a second. I backed out, turned around in the clearing, and drove down the gravel road faster than I should have, tires kicking up dust and rocks. I didn't look back. It took over an hour to reach the nearest gas station with a payphone. I called my cousin. Still no answer. I left a message telling him I was gone, that someone had been on the property, that he should change the locks and check the place thoroughly. A week later, he finally called me back. Said he'd gone up there, and everything was exactly as I left it. Nothing out of place. No signs of anyone. No footprints. No marks on the trees. He said I must have imagined it. But I didn't. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I haven't gone back since. It started on a late Friday afternoon. I had finished my shift at the hardware store and was driving out to spend the weekend alone at my cousin's old cabin. He had moved to another state and told me I could use the place anytime I wanted. The idea of being alone in the woods didn't bother me. I wanted the quiet. The last few months had been exhausting, between work, personal stuff, and just the noise of the city. I felt like I hadn't had a moment to breathe. The drive took about 3 hours. The last part was rough, all gravel and dirt, and I had to slow down to keep from bottoming out my car. By the time I got there, the sun was almost gone, casting that deep orange light over the trees. The cabin sat about half a mile from the nearest paved road, tucked between thick woods and a small creek that ran parallel to it. It was built simple. A porch with a bench, one door, a few windows, and a little chimney poking out the top. I had only been there once before, years ago, but it looked pretty much the same. Inside, everything was dusty but solid. One main room with a wood-burning stove, a small kitchen, and a bedroom off to the side. The bathroom was outside, just an outhouse behind the trees. I put my bag on the bed and got to work airing out the place. Opened the windows, cleared out cobwebs, swept the floors. It was peaceful work, and the silence out there wasn't the empty kind. It felt full, like the wind had weight, like the trees breathed. Once I had the place set up, I made a quick dinner on the camp stove, sat out on the porch, and just let the quiet soak in. There were birds calling in the distance, and once or twice, I heard something big moving through the woods, probably a deer. The sun was gone now, and the last light clung to the sky like a faded bruise. I had no signal out here, no internet. Just my phone's flashlight and the old lantern I found hanging behind the door. I decided to turn in early. I was tired from the drive, and without anything to distract me, sleep came fast. I woke up in the middle of the night for no reason. No noise, no dream. Just awake. The kind of awake where your body feels ready to move before your mind catches up. I laid there for a bit, eyes adjusting to the darkness. The only light came from the moon leaking through the window. That and something else. A faint red glow. I sat up slowly. The glow was coming from outside. At first, I thought it was the tail lights of a car, but it was too steady, too dim. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out. Nothing. No lights. No movement. Just trees and shadows. I stood there for a long time, watching. I started to think maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. Maybe I had been dreaming with my eyes open. I was about to go back to bed when I saw it again. This time, clearer. A red flicker through the trees, deeper into the woods. It wasn't firelight. It didn't move like that. It was too smooth, like a beam being aimed, then quickly shut off. I stayed up after that, sitting on the edge of the bed, fully awake, listening. But nothing else happened. No more light. No more sound. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. Probably someone hiking with a flashlight. Maybe they were camping nearby. Still, I couldn't shake it. That red glow stayed in the back of my head all day. I spent the morning hiking around the area. I didn't see any other campsites or even signs that someone else had been nearby. The ground was soft from rain the week before, and there were no recent footprints. No tire marks on the dirt path either. Back at the cabin, I chopped some wood for the stove and boiled water to clean up. The rest of the day passed quietly. I even started to enjoy it again, leaning into the stillness. I made dinner, cleaned up, then sat outside until the stars came out. That night, the red light came back. This time, it was closer. I was lying in bed, not asleep yet, when I noticed it. A soft pulse, like a heartbeat through the window. I got up fast, heart already racing. I turned off the lantern and crept to the window, crouched low. Through the glass, I could see it more clearly now. A red circle, about the size of a dinner plate, glowing faintly behind the trees. It hovered just above the ground, unmoving. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell myself it was some weird reflection or a distant light, but I knew it wasn't. It was too specific, too perfectly round. I stood there frozen for what felt like hours. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. I stayed up the rest of the night, ears straining, skin crawling with every creak and groan of the old cabin. By morning, I had decided I was going to leave. Whatever that light was, I didn't want to be around if it came back. I packed my stuff, locked up the cabin, and got in the car. But the car wouldn't start. Battery was dead. I tried a few more times, got nothing. The nearest town was miles away, and I didn't have any tools to jump the battery. I didn't know what drained it. It had been fine when I drove in. I took a deep breath, grabbed my backpack, stuffed in some food and water, and started walking. I stayed on the dirt road, figuring I'd eventually hit the main highway. It was slow going, the sun was hot, and the woods on both sides seemed to press in tighter with every mile. Then I heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like a pressure change, like when a storm is coming. The air felt thicker, heavier. I stopped walking and looked around. That's when I saw it, the red light. Again, but this time, it was in the middle of the road, ahead of me. I froze. It wasn't floating now. It was attached to something. I couldn't see what exactly. Just a tall shape, hunched, unmoving. The light was right in the middle of its chest. Pulsing. Slow. Steady. I backed away, trying not to make a sound. My boots crunched on the gravel, and the thing tilted its head. Just a little. That was enough. I turned and ran. Back down the road, back toward the cabin. I didn't look back. I could hear something behind me. Not footsteps exactly, but something moving. Branches snapping. Leaves rustling. It was fast. By the time I made it to the cabin, my chest was burning, and my legs felt like rubber. I slammed the door, locked it, pushed the old dresser in front of it, then fell to the floor, gasping. Hours passed. I didn't move. I just sat there, ears ringing, heart thudding. It never knocked. Never tried to get in. Eventually, I crawled to the window and looked out. Nothing. Just trees and dark. The next morning, the car started. No explanation. I didn't care. I drove like hell out of there. Didn't stop until I hit the highway. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not because I was scared they wouldn't believe me, but because I didn't want to think about it anymore. Weeks went by. Then months. I tried to move on. Tried to tell myself it was all stress. Hallucinations. Maybe I had hit my head, or maybe it was just a trick of the light. Then one night, I came home from work. My apartment was dark. I flicked on the lights, dropped my keys on the counter, and turned to close the door. Just before it latched, I saw it. Through the gap, a red glow. Pulsing. Steady. Waiting. I don't even know where to begin, because I still can't explain what exactly happened that day. It doesn't feel like some grand story. It feels like a slow, creeping nightmare that happened in broad daylight and never fully left my body. It started with a simple hike. I'd taken a week off work to clear my head. Burnout was crawling under my skin, and I needed air, space, quiet. I booked a small cabin near a national forest. No Wi-Fi, no reception. Just me, a fire pit, a stocked cooler, and miles of trail. I planned to hike every day, sleep early, reset. The cabin was deep in the woods. To get there, I had to take a rough gravel road for nearly 20 minutes, passing no other homes, only trees pressing in from both sides. The place was basic but fine: bed, small kitchen, a wood-burning stove. I unpacked, walked a short trail nearby just to stretch my legs, then settled in early. The next day, I chose a moderate loop trail that went about 9 miles, starting from a small pull-off a few minutes down the road. I parked, locked the car, strapped on my backpack, and headed out. The first few miles were peaceful. It was quiet, but not eerily so. I heard birds, the wind, the occasional rustle in the brush. My body relaxed into the rhythm of walking. Around mile 5, the trail dipped into a valley, then climbed up into a thicker patch of woods. I remember checking the trail marker nailed to a tree. It was still the right color and symbol. I kept going. The trees got denser. Less sunlight made it through the canopy. The trail narrowed. I thought about turning back, but figured it was just a short patch. I still had plenty of daylight. But after another half mile, something started to feel off. I don't mean in some dramatic, sixth sense way. Just little things. The trail, for one, began to twist more than I expected. Then it narrowed even more, with roots and rocks that hadn't been as common earlier. It felt less maintained. I assumed I'd accidentally followed a side path. I pulled out my trail map, but it didn't show this level of detail. Still, I pressed on, hoping it would curve back to the main loop. Then I noticed the silence. No birds, no wind, just me and the crunch of my boots on dry leaves. I stopped walking to listen. Nothing. That kind of silence is heavy. It gets into your ears and makes your own breathing sound too loud. I took a sip of water, stood there a minute longer, and decided to turn back. I wasn't interested in getting lost. But as I turned, something flickered across my vision. Not a person, not an animal, just movement. I snapped my head to the side, staring into the trees, heart suddenly beating faster. It had been to the left, maybe 30 feet out. But now I saw nothing, not even a squirrel. I held still, eyes scanning the underbrush. Still nothing. Probably a deer, I thought, or a branch falling. My mind was playing tricks. I told myself that, and headed back the way I came. Except after 20 minutes of walking, I didn't recognize anything. The trail was still narrow, still rocky. The trees still dense, but none of it looked familiar. I should have hit the bend that curved back toward the valley. I should have seen the trail marker again. I didn't. I stopped, trying to breathe slowly. I checked the map again, then my phone. No signal, of course. I looked at the sun, still fairly high but dropping. I didn't panic, not yet. I figured I'd keep heading downhill, assuming it would lead me back toward the valley and eventually to a road or the original trail. I kept walking. Another 30 minutes. Still nothing. No signs. No markings. I started to shout every few minutes, just in case. Nothing answered back. The light was changing. Shadows getting longer. The trees somehow looking closer together, like they were leaning in. That's when I first heard it. A snap. Not mine. Not a dry branch under my boot. It was sharp, fast, behind me. I froze, my ears strained. Silence again, then another, closer. I turned quickly, scanning the woods. Again, I saw nothing, but something was there. I was sure of it now. I started walking faster. My boots hit the ground harder than before. I kept my eyes forward. Don't look back. Just keep moving. I felt it, though. That thing you feel when something is watching you. It was thick. My spine felt tight. My skin itched. Every sound of the forest became louder. Twigs, leaves, even my own heartbeat. Another snap. Closer. I started jogging. The pack bounced on my shoulders. I didn't care. I needed to put distance between me and whatever was out there. But the trail wasn't helping. It twisted again, then forked. There had been no forks earlier. I chose the left without thinking. It was a mistake. That path led uphill, steep and rough. I climbed, nearly on all fours by the end, heart pounding. At the top was a flat rock outcropping. I stopped there to breathe, to think, and I saw something. Down below, between the trees. A shape. Not human. At least, not clearly. It stood on two legs but was too still. Too tall. It was far enough that I couldn't make out details, but close enough to know it wasn't an illusion. It faced my direction. Then it moved. Not walked. It shifted, fast, from standing to gone. No noise. 1 second there, next gone. Like it dropped or ducked. I backed away from the ledge and turned to run. I don't know how long I ran. The trail disappeared. I was just crashing through woods now, ducking under branches, cutting my arms and legs. At one point I tripped, slammed into the ground, and just laid there, face in the dirt, gasping. Then I heard it again. A footstep. Careful. Deliberate. Not an animal. Too controlled. I held my breath. Then another step. I bolted. Branches whipped my face. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. I don't even remember picking a direction. I just ran. Eventually I broke through a thicket and saw something that nearly made me cry. A road. Not the main one, but a dirt access road. I stumbled down it, feet barely staying under me, until I reached a clearing. And there, at the far side, was a parked pickup truck. Empty. I didn't care. I ran to it. It was unlocked. I jumped in the bed, curled up, and waited. It felt like hours before someone returned. A man in work boots and a camo jacket. He was startled to see me, of course, but I barely managed to explain what happened. He didn't ask many questions, just offered me water and drove me back to my car. I didn't report it. What would I say? That I got spooked in the woods? That something followed me? I had no proof. No pictures. Just scratches, bruises, and a deep, gut-level certainty that something had been out there with me. I left the cabin the next day. Even now, I can't hike the same way. Every trail feels too quiet. Every snapped branch behind me sends my heart racing. I tell myself it was just my mind, that stress and isolation played tricks on me. But I know what I felt. Something was there, and it wanted me to know it. I don't think I ever really understood what fear was until that night. Not movie fear, not horror book fear. Real fear. The kind that settles in your stomach like a rock and spreads cold through your chest until you can barely breathe. The kind that sharpens every noise and makes shadows feel like they're alive. The kind that makes your own heartbeat sound like a warning drum. It started simple. I was just out for a hike. I'd done it plenty of times before, and I always enjoyed the solitude. I wasn't some expert or survivalist, just someone who liked nature and quiet. I'd found a place online that not many people talked about. A long trail that wound deep into a national forest about 2 hours from home. The photos showed wide ridges, dense pine woods, and some old fire roads barely used anymore. Exactly the kind of place I liked. No crowds, no noise, just trees and wind and dirt. I left early in the morning. Packed a backpack with snacks, water, flashlight, a knife, and some emergency stuff like a lighter and first aid kit. I wasn't planning to camp, just a long hike in and out. It was late fall, cool but not too cold. The leaves had mostly dropped, and the sky was that dry, pale blue that always makes the air feel thinner. I parked at a small pull-off on a gravel road and started walking. The trail started wide, clearly marked, with some old tire tracks from trucks. After about an hour, the path narrowed. The trees grew closer together, the slope started rising, and it got quieter. The deeper I went, the less signs of people I saw. No wrappers, no footprints, nothing. It was peaceful, really. I liked it. I took photos, listened to the birds, and followed the trail up into the hills. A little before noon, I found a clearing and stopped to eat. I sat on a fallen log and had some jerky and trail mix, just soaking it in. That quiet, the stillness. But something about that clearing felt odd. I couldn't place it. The grass there was flattened in spots, not by wind or animals. Just strange patches like someone had been laying down in several places, but there was no sign of anyone. No fire pit. No garbage. I brushed it off. Maybe deer had been bedding down there. I kept going after lunch, planning to loop around and come down on a separate trail I'd seen on the map. The woods got thicker. The ground was rough, covered in fallen branches and soft earth. It got harder to follow the trail, but I was still confident. I had my phone, a map, a compass. I wasn't lost. But that feeling started to creep in. You know the one. When it feels like someone's behind you. When every step you take seems too loud. I turned around more than once. Nothing. Just trees. Shadows. The sound of wind moving through branches. I pushed it out of my head. It was just nerves. Being alone in the woods does that. I kept walking. After another hour, I realized something was off. I checked my map and tried to find the trail split I was supposed to take, but it wasn't there. I had either missed it or it was overgrown. I decided to backtrack a bit, find a familiar spot, and take it from there. I turned around and walked maybe 20 minutes, but nothing looked familiar. No log I remembered, no strange boulder or bend in the trail. Just more trees. That was the first moment I really paused. My mouth felt dry. I took a drink from my bottle and told myself I had just gotten turned around a little. The sun wasn't down yet. I had hours of daylight left. Worst case, I had to sleep out here and hike back in the morning. I had enough to be okay for a night. Still, I picked up my pace. But it got worse. The more I walked, the less sense it made. I tried going downhill, thinking that might lead to a road or a stream or something. But the hills kept rising and falling in ways I didn't expect. The light shifted. Trees looked warped in ways I couldn't explain, bent in odd angles, or with bark that seemed too smooth, too pale. Maybe I was just panicking. Maybe it was just how the light hit things. Then I found something. A rope. Not hanging, not tied to anything. Just a rope on the ground, maybe 10 feet long. It was dirty, frayed, but definitely a rope. Not something you'd find randomly in the middle of the woods. I stopped, looked around. Nothing. No bag, no tools, no people. Just the rope. I didn't touch it. I just moved on faster now. My heart was pounding. I kept checking behind me, scanning the trees. Nothing. But the sound of my footsteps started to feel wrong. Not just echoing. Like something else was stepping too, just a half second off. Not loud. Not clear. But there. I started jogging. Not full speed, but enough to make noise. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I just wanted out. I pulled out my phone, checked the map again. No signal. Not even a hint. I tried the compass. It spun slowly, lazily, and then stopped in a way that didn't line up with the sun. Maybe it was just my hand shaking. Maybe the compass was old. I don't know. Then I saw the jacket, hanging on a tree branch, faded green, like army surplus. Just one sleeve looped over the limb, like it had been dropped or someone had tried to dry it. I stared at it for a while, looked at the ground. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign of anyone, just the jacket. I left it. I didn't want to touch anything. The sun started dipping. The air got colder. I put on my own jacket, zipped it all the way up, and kept moving. My legs were getting tired. I tried to remember how far I had come, how far it might be back to the road, but it all blended together. The trail didn't look like a trail anymore, just forest floor. I heard a sound ahead. Not an animal, not wind. Something heavy, maybe a footstep, but only one. Then silence. I stopped walking, held my breath. Nothing. Then another one. Closer. I turned around and walked the other way. I didn't care about direction anymore. I just wanted to get away. I kept walking until it was almost fully dark. I had a headlamp, but I didn't want to use it. The light felt like it would make me a target, even though I couldn't say why. So I walked in the dark. The moon came up, weak and thin, barely enough to see. I tripped, fell hard. My hands hit something cold and smooth. Metal. I scrambled up, shined my light for just a second. It was an old car. Rusted. Windows gone. Trees growing up around it. The forest had claimed it, but it was real. Not crushed, not destroyed, just abandoned. The inside was stripped. No seats, just a shell. I backed away and kept going. I walked until I couldn't anymore. My legs were shaking. I found a spot between two thick trees and sat with my back to one of them. I didn't light a fire. I didn't eat. I just sat there, knife in my hand, head on a swivel. Every few minutes I thought I heard something. A branch, a whisper, breathing, but nothing came. I didn't sleep, just waited for the sky to lighten. And when it did, I got up and started walking again. By late morning, I found a stream, followed it. It crossed a game trail, and that trail eventually led to a fire road. And that road led to the gravel lot where my car was. Just like that, I was out. It didn't feel real. The forest looked normal again. The birds sang. The trees looked the right shape. I got in the car, drove home, and didn't talk about it. No one would believe me. I didn't see anything clear. Didn't hear voices or see faces. Nothing that would make a good story. But it was real. Something out there was watching. Not helping, just watching. I don't go hiking alone anymore. Not deep. Not where the trail fades, and the trees seem to lean in a little too close. I kept the knife. I keep it sharp. I don't know if it would have helped, but it's the only thing that made me feel like I had even a little bit of control out there. Like I wasn't just prey. That's the thing about fear. Real fear doesn't shout. It doesn't scream. It waits. Quiet. Patient. And when it finds you, you remember it. Forever. I didn't plan for the weekend to turn out the way it did. It started like any other quiet trip. I just wanted to get out of the city, clear my head, and spend a few days in peace. The stress from work had been building up for months, and I couldn't take another week of staring at computer screens or sitting in endless meetings. So I took Friday off, packed up my gear, and drove out to a remote area in the northern part of the state, near a stretch of land that bordered a national forest. It wasn't a marked campground, but I had read about it on a hiking forum. A few people had said it was quiet, beautiful, and untouched. That was what I needed. The drive took nearly 4 hours. I left before sunrise and reached the dirt road turnoff by late morning. It was rough going from there, narrow, uneven, and lined with thick woods on both sides. I drove slowly, watching for dips and rocks, and finally pulled off near a clearing that looked perfect. It was a flat, grassy space surrounded by trees, with a small creek running about 50 feet away. The air smelled like pine and damp soil. It felt good to breathe it in. I set up my tent and small folding chair near the edge of the clearing, where I had a good view of the tree line and the slope of the hills beyond. There were no other people, no signs of anyone else camping nearby. It was exactly what I had hoped for. I spent most of that first day walking the trails nearby, following deer paths and taking photos. I saw fresh scat and prints, mostly deer, but also a few that might have belonged to coyotes. Nothing unusual. I kept my pocket knife on me anyway. You never really know out here. That night, the air got cold fast. I built a small fire and heated up some canned soup, then just sat back and watched the stars. The sky was so dark out there, and the stars felt like they were just hanging above my head. I hadn't seen a sky like that in years. It was quiet, too, not silent, but natural quiet. No car engines, no phones buzzing, just the sound of the wind through the branches and the occasional owl call. I slept well that night. The cold air made it easier. I woke up once around 3 a.m. needing to pee and stepped outside. The fire was long dead, and the darkness around my tent was thick. I used my flashlight and moved quickly, trying not to step on anything in the underbrush. When I was done, I paused for a moment and listened. Nothing, just the forest. The second day, I hiked deeper into the woods. I brought a day pack with some food, water, my compass, and a map. I followed a narrow trail that led up the side of a hill. The higher I climbed, the better the view got. Around noon, I reached a rocky overlook where I could see for miles. Trees, hills, more forest. It really made me realize how far out I was. I hadn't seen a single person car, or even aircraft since I left the main road. On my way back down, I noticed something odd. It was small, just a little detail, but it caught my eye. A branch had been snapped clean off a tree, about 7 feet up. That wasn't strange in itself. Animals break branches. Wind does too. But this one looked different. The break wasn't jagged like you'd expect. It looked almost like it had been twisted, and pulled until it snapped. The bark around it was scraped downward. I paused, stared at it for a while, then shrugged it off. Probably a bear. Maybe even another hiker passing through. I moved on. That night, after dinner, I walked down to the creek with my flashlight. The moon was out, casting a dull light over the water. I followed the bank for a while, just listening to the sound of water moving over rocks. It was peaceful. On my way back, I froze. About 30 feet in front of me, near the edge of the trees, I saw movement. It wasn't clear at first, just a shifting of shapes. I turned my flashlight toward it and caught the briefest glimpse of something tall, something that moved quickly between the trees. The light hit it for a fraction of a second, and then it was gone. I stood still for a long time. My heart was beating hard, and my mouth went dry. I told myself it was a deer. Probably just a deer. Maybe a moose, though that seemed unlikely for this area. Whatever it was, I didn't want to find out in the dark. I walked fast back to camp, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in my sleeping bag listening for every sound. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made me tense up. The fire was small now, just enough to throw off a bit of warmth. I kept the flashlight beside me, along with my knife. At some point, I must have drifted off, but it wasn't restful. I had that kind of half-sleep where your body rests, but your mind stays alert. I remember waking again, probably a bit before dawn. The sky was still dark, but not pitch black. And I heard it. Footsteps. They weren't heavy, but they were deliberate, crunching slowly through the leaves, coming closer. I sat up in my sleeping bag, holding my breath. The fire was nearly out. I reached for the flashlight and turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness, but I didn't see anything. I listened. The steps had stopped. I waited a long time before I got up and stepped out. I shined the light all around slowly, checking the trees and the path toward the creek. Nothing, but I felt something, like I was being watched. My skin prickled. I didn't go back to sleep. I stayed up until sunrise, then made breakfast with shaking hands. I considered leaving that morning, but I kept telling myself it was just animals. Maybe I was getting paranoid. I had 2 more nights planned, and I didn't want to waste the trip. That was my mistake. Around noon, I went back up the trail, this time heading west instead of east. I wanted to stay closer to camp. As I walked, I kept checking behind me. I tried not to let my nerves get to me. I focused on the trail, the sounds of birds, the sunlight filtering through the trees. Then I found it. It was a small clearing, maybe 20 feet across. In the middle was a pile of bones. They were picked clean. No meat, no fur. Just white, sun-bleached bones, stacked together in a loose pile. They weren't arranged in any kind of order, but the stack was too neat to be natural. Something had put them there. I stared at it for a long time. My gut was screaming at me to leave. I backed away slowly and turned around. I moved quickly, heart pounding. I kept expecting to hear something behind me, but the woods were silent. I didn't stop until I reached camp. I packed up most of my gear right then and there. I left the tent up for the night, but kept everything else in my car. I made the fire bigger that night. I didn't go for a walk. I didn't even sit and enjoy the view. I stayed by the fire listening. At some point in the night, I heard the sound again. Footsteps. Slower this time, coming from the direction of the creek. I turned the flashlight on and pointed it toward the sound. Nothing. I held it there, hand shaking. Then I saw it. Just at the edge of the light, maybe 30 feet away, something stood there. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet. Thin. I couldn't make out its face, but it was standing upright still. It didn't move. I couldn't move either. After what felt like forever, it turned and walked slowly back into the trees. I stayed up the rest of the night with my back to the fire and my eyes on the woods. At first light, I tore down my tent, threw everything into the back of the car, and left. I didn't even bother to fold anything. I just got out. The drive back was long, and I kept checking the rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, but I didn't stop until I reached the highway. I didn't relax until I was back in my apartment with the door locked. I haven't gone camping since. I think about it sometimes, about going back and trying to understand what I saw. But I can still feel that sensation, the cold in my gut, the way the hairs on my neck stood up when I knew something was watching me. Whatever it wasn't a ghost. It wasn't anything supernatural. It was real. It was out there. And it wasn't afraid of me. I didn't imagine it. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I haven't told anyone about it. I don't see the point. They'd think I was making it up, or that I got scared of a deer in the dark. But I know. Something was there. Something is still there. And it knows that I saw it. I never used to think twice about long drives. In fact, I kind of enjoyed them. They gave me space to think, to just be alone with my thoughts, listen to music, and feel the road. But after what happened last year, I don't feel the same. It was supposed to be a simple trip, just 6 hours to deliver some equipment from our office in the city to a smaller branch out in the rural parts of the state. The route was straightforward, most of it highway, then a couple hours on smaller roads cutting through hills and forested areas. I started the drive around noon. The first few hours were easy. Just me, the open road, and a few energy drinks in the cooler beside me. I made good time until I got off the main highway. That's when things started to feel different. The road narrowed, the trees got closer, and the cell signal dropped to 0. I didn't think much of it. I had downloaded the maps and directions, and I had made this kind of trip before, just not to this exact location. It was late summer, but the weather had started to shift. Heavy clouds had rolled in, and there was a wet chill in the air that didn't fit the season. I figured rain was coming. The road turned rough, filled with potholes and patches. No other cars passed me. For about an hour, I didn't see a single vehicle, house, or even a mailbox. It was just me and the forest. About 30 minutes before I was supposed to arrive, the GPS instructed me to take a turn onto a road I hadn't noticed until I was right up on it. There wasn't a sign, just a narrow dirt path cutting into the woods. It looked more like a logging trail than a proper road. Still, I trusted the directions and turned in. The first thing I noticed was how dark it was. The trees on either side were so thick their branches touched above the road, forming a kind of tunnel. Even though it was just past 4 p.m., it felt like twilight. The road twisted and dipped more than I expected. My tires kicked up wet leaves and mud. I had to slow down to a crawl in some spots. The deeper I went, the more I began to feel something was off. It wasn't just the isolation. I'd been alone on country roads before. This was something else, a kind of weight in the air, like I was being watched. About 10 minutes in, I saw something ahead. A shape. At first, I thought it was a fallen tree or a large branch, but as I got closer, I saw it was an abandoned car. It was an old model, maybe from the early 2000s, sitting crooked in the middle of the path. The windows were fogged up, and the paint was dull, covered in leaves and dirt. I slowed to a stop a few feet behind it. The car looked like it had been there for a while. I waited a moment, not sure what to do. I honked the horn once. Nothing. The forest swallowed the sound almost instantly. I stepped out of my car and walked up to the driver's side of the abandoned vehicle. The inside was empty. No bags, no sign of people. Just an old coat draped over the passenger seat. The keys weren't in the ignition. I checked the road around it. No fresh tracks. Just mine. That car had been there for a long time. I couldn't drive around it. The path was too narrow. My only options were to turn back or somehow move the car. I figured if I could shift it just enough, I might be able to squeeze past. I popped my trunk to grab a tire iron in case I needed leverage. That's when I noticed it. There were drag marks in the mud. Faint, but clear enough to see. They started near the driver's side door and led into the woods. Not footprints. Just 2 long, shallow trails, like something heavy had been pulled off the road. I stood still listening. The woods were quiet. Not silent. I could hear wind moving the trees and the distant sound of birds, but something felt wrong. I tried to shake it off. Maybe someone had broken down, wandered into the woods looking for help, and never came back. That thought wasn't much better. I went back to my car, got in, and reversed a bit to give myself room. Then I slowly crept forward again, turning slightly and driving onto the shoulder, 2 wheels in the mud, trying to edge past the abandoned vehicle. The back end of my car skidded as the ground gave way. My tires spun, kicking up mud. I stopped, backed up, and tried again, this time with more momentum. My car lurched and scraped past the other one, the side mirror brushing the old vehicle. Once I was clear, I kept going. The road got even worse. Potholes turned into ditches, and at one point I had to drive through a shallow stream. I began to doubt the directions. Maybe I missed a turn, but there were no signs, no intersections, just this endless winding path through trees and fog. Then I saw the cabin. It was small and old, tucked into a clearing that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The structure leaned slightly, as if one corner had sunk into the earth. The roof was sagging, and the windows were boarded up. There was a single porch light above the door, but it wasn't on. I pulled up and parked a few feet away. According to the GPS, this was the drop-off point. But there was no signage, no other cars, no sign of life. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. I got out and walked to the front porch. The steps creaked under my weight. The door was shut, but not locked. I pushed it open slowly. The smell hit me first, mildew, old wood, and something else I couldn't place. The air inside was cold and damp. There were a few broken chairs, a table with one leg missing, and a small wood stove in the corner. A staircase led upward, but it was blocked by a fallen beam. There were no signs of recent use. No footprints in the dust. No lights. I walked back outside. The clouds had gotten darker, and it felt like the sun was already gone. The woods around the clearing looked different now. Thicker. Closer. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years, fear. Not the kind you get from horror movies or dark hallways. This was real, deep in my chest, tight and cold. I decided to leave. I'd figure out the delivery later. This place wasn't right. I got in the car and turned the key. Nothing. Just a click. I tried again. Same thing. My heart sank. I popped the hood, checked the battery connections. Everything looked fine. I tried the key again. Click. No engine turnover. I sat there, staring at the dashboard. Then I heard it. Movement. Not in front of me. Behind. I turned and looked out the rear window, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. I locked the doors and sat still. The sound came again. Leaves crunching. Slow steps. Then silence. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour. It felt like forever. At some point, I reached into the back seat and grabbed the flashlight I kept in my emergency kit. I clicked it on. The beam was weak, but enough to see a few feet ahead. I opened the door slowly and stepped out. The forest was dead quiet. I pointed the light toward the edge of the clearing. Just trees. I swept the beam left, then right. That's when I saw it. A shape, standing just inside the tree line. Too far to see clearly, but it was tall. Maybe a person. I froze. The shape didn't move. I backed toward the cabin, not taking my eyes off it. I reached the porch, climbed the steps, and went back inside, shutting the door behind me. There was no lock, just an old bolt that barely held. I slid it into place and stepped back. I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of that cabin all night, holding the flashlight and listening. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke up to light pouring through the cracks in the boards. Morning. The shape was gone. I stepped outside. The woods looked normal again. Birds were singing. The air was warmer. I walked back to my car and tried the key. The engine turned over immediately. I didn't wait. I drove out of there as fast as the road allowed, scraping past the abandoned car again and finally reaching pavement. The signal returned a few miles later. I called my boss and made up a story about getting lost and car trouble. I never told anyone what I really saw. Weeks later, I checked the satellite map of the area. The cabin wasn't marked. There was no road where the GPS had taken me. Just dense forest. I haven't gone on a long drive since. It started with something as simple as wanting some space. Life was getting too loud. Phones buzzing, cars honking, people talking, shouting, moving all around me. I felt boxed in. I wanted a break from it all. So I packed a small bag, threw in some water, a few granola bars, a knife, a flashlight, and my old hiking boots. I left my phone at home on purpose. No notifications. No distractions. I just wanted quiet. Just one night in the hills to clear my head. I drove out early in the morning, before the sun had fully risen. The roads were mostly empty. I headed north, where the hills rose up out of the farmland, covered in dry grass and low shrubs. I remembered a place I'd been to once with my uncle years ago, a narrow trail that led up into a series of small ridges, not too far from the highway, but hidden enough that you felt like you were in the middle of nowhere. That's where I went. I parked the car near a dirt pull-off and started walking. The heat was already starting to build by the time I reached the trailhead. I hadn't done any real hiking in years, but my legs remembered the rhythm quickly. The crunch of dirt underfoot, the slow pull in my thighs as I climbed, the soft burn in my lungs. It felt good. The trail twisted and climbed for a while before leveling out near a small plateau. From there, I could see out over the valley. Golden hills rolled off into the distance, and a few thin clouds drifted high above. I found a flat patch of ground, dropped my bag, and sat down. The silence was almost complete, just a soft wind brushing through the dry grass. I hadn't realized how much I missed that kind of quiet. I spent the day exploring the surrounding ridges. There wasn't much out there, just dirt, rocks, old gnarled trees, and the occasional rabbit darting off into the brush. I didn't see another person the entire time. That was exactly what I wanted. Just space, air, and the sound of my own footsteps. As the sun began to dip lower, I returned to my little spot and set up a rough camp. No tent, just a sleeping bag on a tarp, and my backpack nearby. I made a small ring of rocks, but didn't bother starting a fire. The warmth of the day still hung in the air, and I liked the idea of sleeping under the stars without the glow of flames. I ate a granola bar, drank some water, and laid back. The sky turned orange, then red, then deep purple. Stars blinked to life one by one. The moon hadn't come up yet, so it got dark fast. I pulled my sleeping bag up to my chest and just listened. Crickets. A distant owl. The wind slower now. I think I drifted off for a little while, though I wasn't sure. Something woke me. A rustle, maybe. A shift in the wind. But I opened my eyes, and the sky was still black. I couldn't see much around me, just vague shapes. I stayed still, listening. Another sound. Not the wind this time. A step. A crunch. Something moving. I slowly sat up and reached for my flashlight. I clicked it on and pointed it toward the sound. Nothing. Just grass and darkness. I held the light there for a few seconds, then swept it in a slow arc. My heart was beating faster. Still nothing. I told myself it was probably a deer. Or a rabbit. Maybe even a fox. I clicked the flashlight off and laid back down. But I couldn't sleep. My ears were on high alert now, tuned to every noise. Another sound. Softer this time. Not a step, more like a brush. Like something dragging lightly through the grass. I sat up again and listened. Silence. My chest was tight. I wasn't scared exactly, but something felt wrong. I didn't know why, but I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I got out of the sleeping bag slowly, standing up as quietly as I could. My flashlight was still in my hand. I scanned the area again, this time stepping away from my camp a few feet. Still nothing, but my gut told me something was nearby. Watching. I felt exposed. I walked out a bit farther, maybe 20 feet from where I'd been lying. I kept the beam of the flashlight moving. I checked behind trees, down into small dips in the land. Nothing. But then, just as I turned, I saw something. A shape. Very still. Low to the ground. Maybe 40 or 50 feet away, at the edge of a small patch of brush. I froze. The light was too weak to see it clearly. I tried focusing the beam. The shape didn't move. It could have been a rock, or maybe a bush, but it hadn't been there earlier. I was sure of it. I took one slow step forward, then another. I raised the light again. Still not clear. I was about to move closer when the shape shifted. Not much, just a subtle motion. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't a bush. Something was crouched there. My body went rigid. Every instinct told me to back away. But I couldn't move. My mind was trying to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Then the shape rose, slow and deliberate. It stood upright. A person. Thin. Tall. But wrong somehow. The way it moved. Too slow, too quiet. My breath caught in my throat. I turned and walked quickly back to my camp. I didn't run. I didn't want to trigger anything by showing fear. I grabbed my backpack and sleeping bag, stuffed the tarp inside, and slung everything over my shoulder. I flicked the flashlight back toward where the figure had been. Nothing. Gone. I didn't care where it went. I just wanted to leave. I started walking down the trail, using the flashlight to guide my steps. The path was narrow and uneven, but I moved fast. Every few minutes I looked back. Nothing. But I still felt like I was being followed. That pressure on the back of my neck. That prickling under my skin. I kept walking, moving faster with each step. My breathing got heavier. My hands were sweating. I slipped once and nearly fell, catching myself on a rock. I kept going. At one point I thought I heard footsteps behind me, soft, but matching my own rhythm. When I stopped, they stopped. I stood completely still for what felt like a full minute. Silence. I didn't want to shine my light back again. I was afraid of what I might see. Or not see. I just kept moving. It took longer to get back than I remembered. The trail looked different in the dark. I thought I was going the right way, but then the hills looked unfamiliar. I couldn't find the fork in the trail where I'd come up earlier. I started to panic. My flashlight flickered. The batteries were low. I shook it, smacked it against my leg. It steadied for a bit, then dimmed again. I was off trail now. Bushes scraped against my legs. Rocks rolled under my feet. My backpack felt heavy. I was sweating, despite the cool air. I was tired, but I couldn't stop. Then I saw it again. Not close this time. Maybe 100 feet away, down the slope. The same shape. Standing. Watching. Still. Too still. I dropped the flashlight. I don't know why. My hands just let go. It rolled away, the light spinning and casting wild shadows. I didn't go after it. I turned and started moving up the hill, through the brush. My legs were scratched. My boots slipped on the dry dirt. I kept climbing. At the top of the ridge, I looked back. The light from the flashlight was gone. So was the shape. But the fear stayed. I walked for hours. My legs ached. My throat was dry. I stopped checking behind me. It didn't matter anymore. I just wanted to get back to the road, to the car, to anything familiar. Eventually, I saw the faint glint of metal in the distance. My car, half buried in shadow, but there. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there, breathing hard. The feeling of being watched didn't go away, even as I turned the key and drove off. Even as the road wound back toward the lights of the city. Even when I walked back into my apartment and shut the door behind me. I don't know who that person was, or what they wanted. Maybe they were just a drifter, a hunter. Maybe I'd camped near their spot, or maybe it was worse than that. I don't know, but I haven't gone hiking since. I haven't left the city alone either. It wasn't the silence I was afraid of anymore. It was what could be hiding in it. I had been driving for almost 9 hours straight. The sun was setting behind the hills as I turned off the main highway and onto a narrow two-lane road that cut through dense, wooded hills. My phone had lost signal about 40 minutes earlier, and the last gas station I passed was so small it looked more like someone's garage than an actual service stop. I had filled up anyway, just in case. I had no idea how far the detour would take me. There had been an accident on the highway, and traffic was completely stopped for miles. I wasn't in the mood to wait there all night. The GPS had offered an alternative route. It looked a bit longer, but it wound through the countryside and would eventually connect back with the main road. I figured it might be more scenic, too, and since I didn't have a strict schedule, I took it. It started out fine. The pavement was a bit rough, and I had to slow down more than I liked. But I passed a few farmhouses and one old barn that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. There were long stretches with no buildings at all, just thick trees pressing close to the road. The light faded fast. One moment it was golden and soft, then suddenly everything turned gray and shadowy. My headlights cast long beams into the trees, and I noticed that some of them looked twisted, their limbs bent in ways that didn't look natural. I told myself it was just the angle or my tired eyes. I adjusted my seat and took a deep breath. I'd been up since before sunrise. As darkness fell, I realized I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. Not behind me, not coming from the other direction. That didn't worry me at first. I was used to long drives, and I liked the quiet. But something about the way the road curved and dipped, the way it kept pulling deeper into the woods, started to feel strange. Like I wasn't just passing through these trees, I was being pulled into them. Then I saw something up ahead. It looked like a sign, bent at an angle, half covered in vines. I slowed down to read it. The paint was faded and chipped, but I made out the words. Road closed ahead. Local traffic only. There was no barrier. No cones. Just that sign. I should have turned around. I thought about it. But I also didn't want to go all the way back. Not if the road closure was just for a small repair or a bridge. I decided I'd keep going for a few more minutes. If I saw anything that looked serious, I'd turn back. I kept driving. The road got worse. Potholes. Loose gravel. Then the trees got denser, pushing in so close that branches started to brush against the side of the car. I was going maybe 20 miles an hour at that point, crawling along. That's when I saw the first car. It was parked on the side of the road, partly off in the dirt. An old blue sedan. Looked like it hadn't moved in years. The tires were flat, and moss had grown up around the wheel wells. The windows were fogged over, and the back windshield had a long crack running across it. Something about it made my stomach tighten. I told myself it was probably just someone who broke down and abandoned it. Still, I locked my doors. The road narrowed even more, and it started sloping downhill. The trees were so thick, now they blocked out the sky. It felt like a tunnel, the kind where your headlights can't quite reach the end. I drove slowly, scanning the sides of the road, looking for any sign of that supposed closure. That's when I saw the second car. This one was newer, a black SUV, but it was in worse shape. The front end was smashed in, like it had hit something hard. The airbags were out. The driver's side door was open. The inside looked empty. I slowed to a stop. I didn't get out. Something was wrong. This wasn't just a closed road. This wasn't just a detour through the country. This road hadn't seen normal traffic in a long time. And those cars, they weren't being towed. They weren't being fixed. They were just left there, forgotten. I stared at the SUV for a long moment. Then I pressed on the gas again. I didn't want to be on that road any longer than I had to. Another mile, maybe 2. I kept hoping I'd see a turnoff, a sign, a light, anything. Then I saw movement. It was quick, at the edge of my headlights. Just a flicker, something low to the ground. I couldn't tell if it was an animal or a person, but it moved too fast for either. I sat up straighter and gripped the wheel. My heart started pounding. I was fully awake now. Every hair on my arm stood up. The road dipped again, and I passed another car. A red truck flipped on its side. Rusted. The roof caved in. The windshield shattered. It looked like it had been there for years. The trees had started growing around it. Then I came to the curve. The road turned sharply left, but there was something blocking it. A large tree had fallen, covering the whole width. It looked like it had been cut, not snapped. Clean edges. Not recent either. The bark was dry and peeling. I stopped. I had no choice. I couldn't go around. The forest floor was thick with roots and brush. Even if I could have driven off-road, I didn't want to. I stared at the fallen tree, and something shifted in the mirror. I looked up. There was someone standing in the road behind me. I didn't hear them approach. They weren't there a second ago. They weren't moving, just standing. Not close, maybe 30 feet back. Too far to make out details, but I could see they were tall, thin, wearing something dark. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers tightened on the wheel. They didn't move. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then they took one step forward. I slammed the car into reverse and backed up fast, jerking the wheel to turn around. The trees scraped loud against the sides. I didn't care. When I looked again, the person was gone. I didn't stop. I kept driving, now back the way I came. Every curve of the road looked wrong now. The trees looked closer, tighter. The air felt heavier. I passed the truck, the SUV, the blue sedan, all of them again. I kept looking in the mirror. Nothing. Then my headlights hit something new. Another car. But it wasn't there before. A white compact, parked in the middle of the road. No lights. No movement. I hit the brakes. I wasn't sure if I should go around. It didn't make sense. How did it get there? I'd just come from that direction. I would have seen it. There was no place for it to turn in from the side. Then the brake lights on the white car lit up. I didn't wait. I threw the car into drive, cut left into the trees, and floored it. The ride was rough. Branches slapped the windshield. Rocks crunched under the tires. I kept the wheel steady and aimed between the widest trees I could find. Eventually, the trees started to thin. The ground leveled. I saw a break in the brush and pushed through. I burst out onto another road. A real road. Paved. Clean. With a yellow dividing line and road signs. I didn't stop. I drove until I saw a town. A gas station. People. I pulled in and parked. I sat there for a long time, heart racing, hands shaking. I tried to look at the map again, but the GPS still had no signal. Later, when I got home, I looked up that road. I couldn't find it. There was no detour marked, no alternate route. No one seemed to know what road I was talking about. Even when I tried tracing the drive backward, checking satellite images, there was nothing. Just trees. Dense, thick trees. I still don't know where I was, but I don't take detours anymore. If there's traffic, I wait. I woke up just after 6 a.m. though I hadn't really been sleeping well. The cabin I had rented was dead silent, and even the trees outside weren't moving. I had arrived the day before, planning to stay the weekend alone in the mountains, away from work, from people, from noise. It was a simple place. No TV, no internet, just an old wooden structure with creaky floorboards and a tiny kitchen. There was a fireplace in the corner, but I didn't bother lighting it the night before. I had brought a heavy sleeping bag and a thick hoodie. It was cold, sure, but manageable. I had done worse in my college camping trips. Outside, the forest stretched in every direction. A narrow dirt trail led back down the mountain about 3 miles to where I parked my car by the ranger's outpost. The trail wasn't really made for vehicles, just for hiking. That was the whole point of this place. Remote, quiet, hard to reach. I had chosen it for that exact reason. I stepped outside, crunching frost under my boots. The air was thin and smelled of pine and cold bark. I walked down to the stream a little ways off to splash water on my face and fill a bottle. There was a moment when I thought I heard something move in the brush to my left, but when I looked, nothing was there. Probably a rabbit, maybe a deer. There were no bears in these woods, at least that's what the pamphlet said. After breakfast, just a couple of protein bars and some water, I decided to take a walk deeper into the forest. There was a long trail that looped around the ridge and came back from the south side. The whole loop would take about 6 hours, maybe more if I took my time. I liked the idea of being gone all day, clearing my mind, letting my body just move while my brain took a break. I had been carrying too much stress lately. Emails, deadlines, phone calls. I needed this. I packed a light bag with more bars, water, a small knife, my phone, mostly for photos since there was no signal, and a compass. I had looked at the paper map earlier and was pretty sure I could follow the trail without issue. It was only supposed to cross 2 other trails, and they were clearly marked. By 8 a.m., I was walking under tall pine trees, the sun barely cutting through. The air was still cold, but I warmed up quickly. My boots dug into the soft earth, and birds made soft clicks and chirps in the branches above. For the first hour or so, I saw no one, heard nothing unusual. Just wind moving through trees and the occasional creaking of a swaying branch. Around 10 a.m., I noticed something strange. The trail I was following had gradually started to fade. At first, it was just a few fewer footprints, then less compact soil. Then the whole thing became barely visible. I checked my compass, trying to make sure I was still heading in the right direction. Southeast, mostly. I figured the trail had been worn down or covered by fallen needles and branches. It happens. Still, I pressed on. I didn't feel nervous yet, just a little annoyed. I didn't want to get off track and have to double back. I slowed down and tried to make out markers, anything. Sometimes trees were painted with small dashes of orange or yellow to keep hikers from wandering off. But I didn't see any of that. I kept walking anyway, feeling like I was still roughly heading along the loop. Then the forest started to feel different. It was subtle. The trees were packed tighter together. The ground felt softer, like it was holding more moisture. I started seeing fungus and darker patches of moss, and the light was dimmer. Less sun got through the canopy now. I checked my compass again, but the needle was jittering. I tapped it, shook it slightly, but it didn't settle properly. That was when the first wave of unease hit me. I stopped walking and stood still listening. Everything was quiet. No birds anymore. Not even the wind. I tried to trace my steps back with my eyes, but the path behind me looked just as wild as the one ahead. I turned around slowly, looking for anything familiar, any shape or tree I might remember. But it all looked the same. I pulled out my phone. No signal, as expected. I opened the compass app. It didn't help much either. The phone seemed to freeze, and then the app crashed. I closed it and shoved it back in the bag. Panic didn't hit me immediately. I'm not the kind of person who freaks out. I told myself I'd just retrace my steps and keep walking north. Eventually, I'd hit something familiar. So I turned and started walking back the way I thought I came. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. Nothing looked familiar. I should have hit the stream again by now. The forest was changing again too. It got denser, closer. The air felt heavier, like it was harder to breathe. My water bottle was half empty, and I could feel sweat building under my arms. Despite the cold air, my hoodie clung to me. I began seeing strange things. Trees with deep gashes in the bark, as if something had scraped them hard. At first, I thought it might be deer antlers or just natural rot, but the slashes were too clean, too purposeful. I saw 5 different trees like that within an hour. All had the same 3 parallel cuts, like claws. My stomach tightened. I started hearing sounds now too. Not birds, not wind, something else. Crunches. Not constant, just every now and then. Dry leaves being stepped on. A branch snapping. Always behind me. Every time I turned around, there was nothing. I looked for movement, watched the spaces between the trees, but saw nothing. Then I caught the smell. Faint at first, but foul. Like rotting meat. It came and went on the breeze. Made my eyes water a little. I covered my nose with my sleeve and kept walking faster. I broke into a full jog when I heard something heavy hit the ground behind me. It wasn't close, maybe 30 or 40 feet back, but it was solid. Like something big had just landed or jumped. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see. I just ran. The forest didn't let up. No clearing, no signs. Just more and more trees. My legs started to burn. My lungs stung. I had to stop eventually. When I did, I dropped to one knee and tried to breathe slowly. That's when I noticed the silence again. Not just quiet, total absence of noise. My breathing sounded too loud. Even my heartbeat felt like it was echoing. I stood and turned slowly. That's when I saw it. A figure, maybe 100 feet away, just barely visible through the trunks. Too far to see clearly. It wasn't moving, just standing, watching. It was tall, broad, maybe a man, but there was something off. I blinked, looked again. It was gone. I turned and ran again. No thought, just instinct. My mind was spinning with questions, but I pushed them down. I didn't want answers. I just wanted out. After what felt like another hour, the trees thinned out. I saw sunlight break through the canopy, stronger now. The air cleared a bit. I slowed down and caught my breath. Then I heard water. A stream. I rushed forward and saw it. A shallow stream cutting through the forest floor. It looked familiar. I followed it downstream, hoping it would lead me back to the cabin, or at least the original trail. My boots splashed in the water as I half walked, half jogged alongside it. Then I saw the cabin, but something was wrong. The door was wide open. I had closed and latched it when I left. I was sure of it. I froze again. The forest behind me felt alive, like it was watching. I stepped inside. Nothing looked disturbed, but I could smell that same foul stench. It was faint, but it clung to the air like oil. I closed the door, locked it, and pulled a chair under the knob just in case. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and tried to calm down. I stayed there for hours, listening. I heard footsteps outside at one point, slow and deliberate. They stopped right at the porch. Then nothing. No knock. No movement. Just stillness. I stayed up all night. I didn't even blink. Just stared at the door. When daylight finally crept through the curtains, I got up, packed my bag, and left. I didn't stop to eat. I didn't look back. I walked straight down the trail, never stepping off it once. I didn't care about taking the loop. I didn't care about seeing the sights. It took me 4 hours to reach the ranger's station. When I got there, the ranger on duty looked surprised. I must have looked like hell. He asked if I needed help, but I just shook my head and got in my car. I drove home in silence. No music, no thoughts. Just the image of that figure in the trees burned into my brain. I never went back. I never even checked to see if that cabin is still listed. I don't want to know what I saw. I don't care. I'm just glad I got out when I did. Because whatever that thing was, it wasn't supposed to be there. And it knew I wasn't supposed to see it. I had been working remotely for a few years and needed a break from the usual distractions. I found a cabin online, hidden deep in the woods of Oregon. It looked like the perfect place to disconnect, a small off-grid spot about 15 miles from the nearest paved road, surrounded by thick forest, no cell signal, no internet. That was exactly what I wanted. The listing mentioned it had solar power, a wood stove, and a well nearby. It looked clean and simple in the photos, and the price was good. I booked it for 2 weeks. I arrived late in the afternoon. The road that led there had narrowed into a rough dirt trail, barely wide enough for my SUV. I could feel the branches brushing against the sides of the car, and the trees pressed in close. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was already behind the trees, and everything had that gray-blue tint that happens just before night sets in. The place looked like the photos. A small structure, weathered but solid. The front porch had a couple of old chairs and a stack of firewood. Inside was sparse but clean. A table, a couple of chairs, a single bed, a small kitchen with a propane stove, and a composting toilet room built into the back. The cabin sat on a small clearing, maybe 30 feet wide, with forest on every side. I unloaded the car and lit a fire in the stove. The temperature was dropping fast. After making some canned soup, I sat outside on the porch for a while with a flashlight, listening to the forest. It was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. It felt peaceful. The first few days went by slowly. I spent time reading, writing in a notebook, cooking simple meals, and going on short hikes during the day. The woods were dense and felt untouched. I didn't see another person, not even a plane overhead. I saw deer tracks and once caught a glimpse of a fox, but otherwise, it was just trees and silence. At night, I stayed close to the cabin. It got pitch black after sundown, the kind of dark where you can't see your hand in front of your face. I had a flashlight, but I didn't wander far after the first night. It wasn't fear exactly, just caution. The forest felt huge and empty, and I didn't want to get turned around. On the sixth night, something changed. I had gone to bed early. It was probably around 9 p.m. I woke up later, not sure what time it was, but it was still dark. There was a noise outside. I lay there, holding my breath. It wasn't an animal sound. It was a steady crunch of dry leaves. Not fast, not heavy, just slow steps moving through the brush. The steps circled around the cabin. Not close enough to be right outside the window, but close enough, maybe 20 feet away. I turned off the small lamp I had beside the bed. The fire had burned low, just glowing coals left. I waited. The steps stopped. For a long time, I didn't hear anything else. I didn't sleep again that night. When the sun came up, I went outside. There were footprints in the frost. Human. The stride was uneven, dragging in places. The tracks circled the cabin and then disappeared into the woods. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a hiker got lost. Maybe someone lived in the area. Maybe it was just curiosity. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever it was hadn't just stumbled across the place. It felt deliberate. That day, I hiked out farther than I had before, trying to see if there were other cabins or signs of people. I found nothing, just more forest. When I came back, I noticed something I hadn't before. One of the chairs on the porch had been moved, just slightly. I couldn't be sure. Maybe I bumped it. Maybe it shifted on its own. But it looked like it had been sat in and left slightly angled toward the woods. That night, I kept the fire going and stayed up. Around 2 a.m., I heard the sound again. Footsteps from the same side, this time slower. I sat in the dark, holding a heavy flashlight like a weapon. I didn't move. The footsteps stopped again and didn't return. In the morning, I found more tracks. They came from deeper in the woods this time and stopped about 10 feet from the window. Then they turned and went back. Still human, still barefoot. That detail struck me hard. It had been cold at night, freezing. Whoever was walking around out there had no shoes on. I wanted to leave. I started packing my things, but realized I hadn't brought enough gas to make the full trip out and back. There was an old gas can in the shed behind the cabin. It was half full. I figured I could make it to town the next day and refill everything, maybe even call the rental owner and let them know what was going on. That night, I heard something else. Not footsteps this time, but breathing, just outside the wall. Heavy, like someone winded, slow and deep. I stayed frozen on the bed. I didn't have a phone signal. No way to call anyone. I just sat there, holding my breath. It lasted about 10 minutes. Then nothing. In the morning, I checked. No tracks. No signs of anything. The frost had melted quickly, and the leaves didn't show much. I still packed. I wasn't going to spend another night there. I loaded the SUV and started driving out. The forest felt different, like it was watching me. I kept checking the rearview mirror. About 2 miles out, I saw movement up ahead. I slowed down. On the edge of the road, half hidden behind a tree, was a figure, just standing there. Bare skin, no clothes, pale, thin, arms close to the body. I couldn't see the face. I didn't stop. I kept driving. The road was rough, and I had to go slow, but I didn't stop. I made it to the main road and didn't look back. I got to a gas station and filled up. I went inside to pay and asked the guy behind the counter if he knew anything about the woods out that way. He just shook his head and said not many people go out there anymore. Said the land used to be logged, but had been abandoned for decades. I told him about the footprints. He didn't seem surprised. I didn't go back to the cabin. I messaged the owner once I had signal and told them I left early, just said I had a family emergency. I didn't want to explain. They didn't ask for details. I drove straight home. Weeks passed. I tried to forget about it, but every now and then, I would wake up in the middle of the night. Sure, I had heard footsteps outside my window. I live in the city. I don't have woods near me. I never saw anything. Probably just my imagination. Still, I got rid of the cabin info, deleted the emails, blocked the rental site. I didn't want to see it again. I still go hiking sometimes. Still like the quiet, but I don't go far out anymore. I stay near trails, near people, and I never sleep in the woods alone. I step into the soft, late afternoon light that filters through dusty windows. The air is thick with the scent of old paper, faint rust, a lingering echo of past years. My boots press through thin sheets of broken glass scattered across the linoleum. The place is silent, save for my own breath and the dull hum of distant traffic. I move slowly, carefully, as though the floor might shudder beneath me, though the building stands solid enough. The old house was abandoned years ago, its walls quiet since life left it. I feel its weight around me, like a heavy blanket that refuses to lift. The ceiling sagged in places, dark stains seeping in slow drips that left faint trails on the plaster. A window frame leans crooked, and through the glass I see the lean, bare branches of trees outside, shifting in the cold breeze. I can feel that breeze now, ghost cool against my skin, brushing along my arms and neck. My shirt clings damply, not warm. I move forward, weight uncertain as I cross into the next room. I notice the floor is uneven here. One step brings a soft creak and a tremor beneath my foot. I pause, breath quickening. My heart thuds behind my ribs. I listen to the silence. Even though nothing stirs, something pulses in the hush, an undercurrent of memory, of the shape of life that once moved through these rooms. Dust motes float in shafts of light, drifting like slow dancers in the stillness. I watch them swirl upward or across, from a shift in the air, from a footstep I took. Each one glints, a tiny fragment of the past, caught in the beam. They cling to the faint smell of mildew and dust, rising from the floorboards and the stale air, rich with time. I walk, pulling my jacket tighter. The fabric rustles gently. The steps echo softly, once, twice, in crooked rhythm with my racing pulse. Shadows twist along the walls, uneven shapes that force my imagination to stretch. At the far end of the hallway, a door hangs open on its hinges. Paint peels from its surface, curling like dry skin. I move toward it, drawn by the contrast of that opening against closed rooms. Inside is a bedroom. I run my hand along the windowsill, grit crumbling under my fingers. A small, square mirror sits on a battered dresser, its glass cracked, edges dark with mold. I avoid looking into it. My own reflection feels exposed in a place like this. Instead, I reach out to touch the texture of the wood, rough, splintered where the veneer has worn away. I imagine fingers like mine, small, delicate, touching it decades ago, smoothing its surface. Then the owner's small drawer opening quietly, the same dust rising then as now. I step back. The floor beneath me shifts, almost gives. I hop back to firmer ground, heart beating wildly. I realize how little the building holds me. I am nearly weightless in its history, a strange, fragile thing. I move on, toward the far corner where sun rays meet dust, forming a kind of golden wall. The light falls across a tattered mattress on the floor, springs bent and broken, the fabric torn in places. I kneel beside it, studying the ragged edges and the thin stuffing spilling out, gray and flattened with age. I think of someone lying there, sleepy or sick, reaching for a drink of water, or maybe staring at that same crack in the plaster. I rise and turn away. Behind me, half hidden beneath the window, sits a stack of old picture frames scattered across the floor. I lift one carefully. Inside is the faded image of a young child standing beside a tree. The photograph is dulled and cracked, the colors pale like half-remembered dreams. The child looks lost, uncertain, towards something just out of view. I hold it gently, fingertips brushing the glass. A shard breaks away, shaving a small piece of frame into my hand. Warm blood wells where the splinter penetrates my skin. I press my palm, taste copper on my tongue from a drop of blood trickling to the floor. I release the frame. I feel panicked. I brush at the blood until the sting dims, focus on my steady breath. I continue. The walls thin into another chamber. Here, the floor has collapsed in part, revealing beams and darkness below. I stop at the edge. Dust and small bricks lie in the hole, broken into jagged lumps. I imagine crashing through, the snap of timber, the loosened rocks against my body. My pulse spreads frantic, warning me. I step back, aware that everything around me holds hidden danger. I walk slowly, balancing on the outer edge until I reach the next room, the old kitchen. Tiles cracked in places, counters worn and stained. The sink is filled with murky water, spider webs curled in one corner. I crouch beside it. The smell of rust and wet iron makes me think of spilled wine or red paint. I peer inside. I surprise a little frog or toadish thing, dark green and slimed across the body, clutching the basin. It leaps away, plops into the water, circles, then stills, almost merging with grime. I sit back on my heels. My body sinks down, dust rising faintly. I breathe. The frog's eyes blink, quick and unnerved. It flicks out a small sticky tongue at a fly trapped beside the rim. Nature persists, even in abandon. I push myself upward and step outside again into hallway darkness. My shadow falls long, fractured by the crumbling walls. I breathe in and out, chest tight, gooseflesh tight across my arms. I pause, listening to the smell of old wood. I imagine the weight of time pressing on me, a dense cloak that I can't lift. I feel small, raw, alert. I round the corner into what must have once been a living room. The fireplace stands ruined. Ashes still remain in its hearth, odd considering how long no fire has burned here. I draw close. I press my hand against the bricks. They are cold, dust rough in my palm. I imagine flames once warmed them, sung inside those stones, soot rising to speak in smoke. I breathe slow. A thin beam of light falls from the tall window, illuminating a cracked mantel. On it, just edge balancing, perches an old metal lamp, rusted beyond use. I brush my fingers across its surface. The relief in the metal under the rust gives little clues of what shape it once was. Part of me aches to touch how men from another age held that same lamp, polished it, lit it when night came, then lifted it to reveal rooms filled with warmth and laughter. I step away and pace toward the center of the floor. I squint to see the carpet, threadbare, shredded, only a faint pattern remains. I trace it in my mind, pale lines of flower shapes, maybe once bright, but now shadows of gold and rose. I kneel and slide one hand across it. The fibers catch in my palm. I think of someone kneeling to pick up a dropped shoe, or a child crawling in play. The carpet is cold, stiff, coarse. I pull back with an unexpected ache in my chest, heavy and real. I sit on the floor, leaning against the wall. The wood behind me is splintered, the paint cracked and moving in tiny scales. I close my eyes. I let myself sink. I can feel the weight of the house in me. I taste the dusty taste of time. My brain flickers through images. Someone pressing their face to this wall long ago, or the house silent while a mother sat there and wept for a child, or a father raising a glass in a quiet moment. I imagine those ghostly images, in memory only not of ghosts but of people imagined from the shape of things. I feel the pulse of their absence. I open my eyes to a beam of afternoon sun meeting my face. It warms me but soft. I stand again slowly. Tiny particles float in the beam. I follow them as they drift upward. I leave the room toward the front door. The studs along the hallway show through peeled paneling. I pass by a place where nails lined one board, like picture hooks, so many of them bent or empty. I imagine photos lining the walls, happy faces long removed. I imagine footsteps up and down these halls, laughter, arguments, quiet. At the door, I pause. It stands ajar. I push it, and it swings open easily, releasing a muted groan of old wood. A sliver of light falls across me from outside, wider now. I step through. Outside, the afternoon has turned toward dusk. The sky loose and wide, ending in soft golds and pale lavender. Outside the ruined walls, I breathe fresh air that carries faint smells of grass, earth, distant gravel shifting under tires. I feel calmer. The tension in my limbs lets go a little. I glance back at the house, its walls sagging, its windows empty eyes, the roof jagged against sky. Whatever danger had pulsed inside, it stays behind me now. A memory, a pressing weight, but not alive in the outside air. I walk away slowly down the path. The ground crunches beneath my shoes, loose pebbles and dry grass whispering. I carry a fragment of that place in me. its texture, its hush, its sense of what has been lost. But the world beyond the ruined door remains alive. I feel sun and wind and open space again. I walk on. Here, the world breathes. I can feel warmth returning to my limbs. The house fades behind me, solid in ruin, but powerless in the face of the light that grows. As I step onto firm ground, the evening air feels alive. I carry the memory of the house's hush, the dust, the ache in my chest, the ache in my senses. But as the light touches my face, I sense renewal in its warmth. The path stretches outward, toward an open sky, toward life that still moves and heals. I inhale deeply, the scent of grass filling my lungs, and with each step, each breath, I feel grounded again. I walk away, toward warmth, leaving the hush behind me forever. It started on a Friday afternoon. I was driving alone to a cabin I'd rented deep in the mountains, something I'd planned for weeks. I needed a break from everything. Life in the city was burning me out, and I just wanted quiet. No internet, no phone, just me, the trees, and a bit of peace. I found this cabin through a small local website. It was privately owned, not part of any big rental service, but the photos looked fine, and the owner gave me directions that seemed straightforward. I trusted it. The drive was long and winding. After 4 hours of highway, I turned off onto narrower roads, then dirt tracks that got worse the further I went. I passed small houses at first, then those disappeared too. Soon, it was just forest and the crunch of gravel under my tires. I drove for what felt like forever until I finally saw the cabin. It was smaller than I expected, tucked in between tall pine trees. The clearing it sat in was just wide enough for a small backyard, a fire pit, and a place to park. I got out, stretched my legs, and looked around. There was no sound except the rustle of wind through the trees. No birds, no animals. That struck me as odd, but I pushed the thought aside. I unloaded my bags, opened the cabin, and stepped inside. It smelled like old wood and dust, but it wasn't bad. Everything was basic: small kitchen, single bed, bathroom with a weak shower. There was a fireplace, a couple of windows, and a table with a few chairs. By the time I got settled, it was getting dark. I made some instant noodles on a portable stove I brought along, then sat outside in the backyard with a jacket on. The sky above the trees was deep blue, and stars were just starting to show. It felt good. I hadn't felt that calm in a long time. I listened to the fire crackling, stared at the sky, and let my thoughts wander. At some point I realized how cold it had gotten. I went inside, locked the door, and got into bed. I left a window open slightly for air and listened to the wind brushing through the branches. It was peaceful until I woke up in the middle of the night. I didn't know what time it was. There was no clock, and my phone was off to save battery. But something had woken me. I lay still, trying to hear past the thumping of my heart. There was a sound outside, faint but clear, crunching, like footsteps on dry leaves and dirt. I held my breath. It wasn't an animal. It was too slow, too deliberate. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The footsteps circled the cabin slowly, one side, then the back, then the other. Then nothing. Minutes passed. Maybe more. I didn't sleep again that night. I stayed awake, ears sharp, staring into the dark. But I didn't hear anything else. When light finally seeped through the trees and into the cabin, I got up. My neck hurt from how stiff I'd been lying. I opened the door and stepped outside. The ground was damp from morning dew, but I walked around the cabin, trying to find any signs of what I'd heard. There were no footprints. Not clear ones anyway. The leaves were disturbed in places, but that could have been anything. I told myself it was probably a deer or something similar, but I didn't really believe that. Still, I brushed it off and made some coffee. I was tired, but I didn't want to ruin the trip by overthinking one weird night. That afternoon, I hiked into the forest. The trails weren't marked, but I followed a stream uphill. The trees were thick, and sunlight barely got through, but it felt good to move. The air smelled clean. I walked for a while, stopping now and then to rest or take a photo. Eventually I reached a clearing, a little bowl in the land where the trees opened up. There were rocks scattered around, and the grass was taller. I sat down on a flat stone and ate a granola bar. As I chewed, I looked around and noticed something strange. Across the clearing, the trees were all stripped of bark at about shoulder height. Not all of them, just a few in a weird pattern. Long, clean strips, like something had been peeled off with a knife. I stood up and walked closer. The bark was shaved off in sections, revealing pale wood underneath. The marks weren't rough like claws. They were smooth like with a blade. I didn't understand it, but it made me uneasy. I turned around and headed back to the cabin. I reached it as the sun dipped low. I felt exposed walking through the woods alone. When I finally saw the cabin roof between the trees, I relaxed a little. I got inside, locked the door again, and lit a fire. I made some more noodles and sat by the fireplace. I tried to read a book I brought, but I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept going back to those trees, the bark, the pattern. I stayed inside that night. No backyard fire, no stargazing, just the fire inside and the sound of the wind again. I lay in bed early, eyes wide open, waiting for the sound again. Nothing happened for hours. Then, just when I was drifting off, I heard it. The same crunching. This time it started at the front. I could hear the steps move across the porch boards, slow and heavy. I didn't move. My mouth went dry. The doorknob rattled once. I froze. There was no mistaking it. It turned slightly, then stopped. No knocking. No voice. Just that brief sound, and then footsteps again, going around the cabin. I sat up, held my breath, and waited. I thought about making noise, yelling maybe, but something told me not to. Something in my gut said to stay quiet. The footsteps circled once more, then faded into the woods. I sat there for maybe an hour, clutching the blanket, listening. But they didn't come back. The next morning, I didn't even check the ground. I just wanted to leave. I started packing my stuff. I stuffed everything into my backpack, rolled up the sleeping bag, and put out the fire. I stepped out to load the car, and froze. There was something on the porch. A rabbit. Dead. Its neck was broken cleanly, and its body was placed right at the edge of the door, like a gift or a warning. It was fresh. No flies yet. I stared at it for a while, then picked it up using a stick and tossed it into the trees. I got in my car and tried to start it. Nothing. The engine cranked but wouldn't turn over. I tried again. Same thing. I got out and opened the hood, but I didn't know much about cars. Everything looked normal. Battery wasn't dead. I tried again. Still nothing. It was like something was stopping the engine from firing. That's when I remembered something the owner had said in the email. There was a tool shed a bit down the trail behind the cabin. He kept some gear there, maybe even fuel or supplies. I didn't want to go, but I had no choice. I grabbed a flashlight, just in case, and followed the trail behind the cabin. The trail was narrow and overgrown. It twisted down between trees and dropped slightly in elevation. After maybe 10 minutes, I saw the shed. It was old, made of rusted metal sheets and wood, leaning to one side. I stepped up to the door and pulled it open. The smell hit me first. Rot and damp. Inside were shelves full of junk, old tools, buckets, tangled rope, gas cans, half-used paint. I searched quickly. There was a gas can, but it was empty. Nothing looked useful. I turned to leave, and stopped. There was a tarp in the back corner, lumpy and oddly shaped. It looked out of place. I stepped closer. My breath caught. Beneath the tarp, sticking out just slightly, was a shoe. A human shoe. I backed away slowly. My skin felt cold, and my ears were ringing. I didn't touch the tarp. I didn't want to see more. I turned and ran back up the trail as fast as I could. I reached the cabin, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook. I didn't know what to do. My phone was still off, and there was no signal anyway. I thought about walking back down the road, but I had no idea how far I'd get, and the thought of being in those woods again, on foot, unarmed, made me feel sick. I decided to wait until daylight. I barricaded the door with a chair and table. I didn't eat. I just sat there, waiting for night to pass. Every sound outside made me flinch. The wind, the creak of trees, small scratches. I stayed up all night, not sleeping, not moving. The footsteps didn't come back. Not that night. When the sun finally rose, I waited a bit longer just to be sure. Then I got my stuff, left the cabin, and started walking down the road. I kept looking behind me every few minutes, half expecting someone, or something, to follow. But nothing came. I walked for hours. Eventually, I saw a small truck parked on the side of the road near a hunting trail. I flagged it down. The driver was an older man, wary at first, but when I explained that my car broke down, he gave me a lift into town. I didn't tell him the whole story. I didn't say anything about footsteps or the rabbit or the shed. I just thanked him and got out at a gas station. I called a tow truck for my car and waited. When it was finally brought back, The mechanic said something had been pulled loose underneath. A fuel line or connection, something not easily done by accident. I never went back for the rest of my stuff at the cabin. I didn't even contact the owner. I just left it all behind. Whatever was in those woods, it didn't want me there. And I had no interest in finding out what it really was. That trip was supposed to give me peace. Instead, it showed me something I still try not to think about. But sometimes, when it's quiet at night, I swear I hear those footsteps again. Not loud, just faint, slow, circling. I always tell myself that this will be the last time I do something so reckless. I tell myself that every time I push beyond what is safe. I tell myself that enough is enough. But thoughts like that drift away once the plan is in motion. Once I feel that terrible rush of being alone and stretched beyond what most people ever touch. That afternoon I parked my car against the sharp curve of the dirt road, not far from the cut bank that looked down into the ravine. The cliffs there drop fast and steep, lined with dead leaves and pine needles, the earth loose where rain had carved tiny channels that lead to nothing but splintered roots and stones. I came for the bridge, a narrow, old concrete span, maybe built when people thought these woods would become part of a highway project, but long abandoned. The slabs were cracked, reinforced bars showing in rusty lines, and underneath, the stream gurgled along among moss-coated boulders. I felt something in me pull toward that place. Maybe I wanted to stand on the bridge and look down into that dark water and feel small and less certain. To feel something that jolted me out of the dullness of everyday life. It was stupid, but I did it anyway. My boots cracked through the dried leaves as I walked deeper into the broken forest. The light was dim even in midday, filtered through brown needles and thick trunks. It was quiet, except for the low hum of wind in the pines and the tap-tap of my heart in my ears, louder than any bird song. I stood on that bridge, hands braced on the cracked rail. The concrete was rough under my palms, the metal bar cold where it showed through cloth. The rust had bled orange across my jacket sleeve when I brushed it. I leaned forward at the center, toes over the edge, looking into the swirling water. Loose stones tumbled down the slope under my foot, shifting earth into the stream. It should have felt peaceful, but every sound was too sharp. The water swirled and flicked light off wet rock, every ripple a threat. The air smelled damp and mineral, a smell I wasn't sure I liked. My chest was tight, as if the forest had squeezed me. I breathed in slow, trying to settle myself, but I felt every nerve alive and raw. I took a step back, but something deeper in me stayed there, hungering. I knew that hunger was foolish, but it was real. At some point I realized I had stayed too long. The sun had drifted low, shadows long and thick. I looked back the way I came. The path was just a faint line among roots. I knew I could find it again. My instincts as a hiker were good, but the forest seemed changed. I felt eyes watching. I told myself it was only my fear. But real fear isn't only in the mind. It settles in the chest, cold and heavy, pressing down. I heard a crack behind me, and my heart leapt. It wasn't a tree snapping. It was quiet, but I froze, lung tight, breath held. Then the snap again, closer, like a stick underfoot, but soft. I spun around. No movement. Just more trees, more darkness between trunks. My ears felt open, blood pulsing in them. My breath came fast. That moment stretched. I took one step, then another, heading back to the car, but not straight, sidestepped, scanning everything, alert to rustle, to drifting light patches in the gloom. I remembered how I'd parked. Against the curve where the road bent just enough to hide headlights from passersby. The area was hardly trafficked. I'd parked low, below the road. If someone came during dusk, they might not see the car easily. And I wasn't sure I'd heard anyone come. I was not afraid of people, at least I didn't think so. But now something unnameable hammered in my mind. I would not have time to explain. I would not want to. I just wanted to be safe away. I pressed on through the pine forest, trying to keep calm, guiding myself by vague, fading light. I kept an ear on every crack and rustle. My boots felt heavy and lead-like. Shadows jutted out along the ground, faint shapes that would vanish when I blinked. There was no trail. I couldn't tell what was moss and what was fallen bark. The slope beside me felt steeper than it had. My foot pressed down and slid on leaf-strewn earth. A jolt, a catch, but I stayed upright. A sharper sound behind me. My heart hammered. Had a limb fallen? Or something heavier? I forced my feet to keep moving downhill. I could feel the road though I couldn't see it. The loose soil gave way to gravel finally. The change underfoot was relief, a path re-emerging. Pale light shone ahead. I moved faster. The forest dimmed, and then I broke into the clearing. The car. The taillights still held some light, where the sun struck dust on the rear windshield. I drove out, tires crunching gravel, radio silent, breath coming in deep gasps. No one else had followed. No shadows moved behind the trees. That night back home, heater rumbling low, I lay awake. The house was too quiet. I remembered the forest and felt it again, the dark between trees, the rustle. I counted each breath. I reminded myself I was safe now. Outside, the night breathed. I thought about turning on everything bright, staying awake until dawn. I did. I sat and stared at the living room wall, the dim streetlight shining through curtains. Every minute felt long. Every sound, from the pipes in the wall to the hum of the fridge, felt too loud. And yet I forced myself to stay. I made coffee. I paced. I checked the doors. I texted someone about how uneasy I felt, but didn't mention details. I just said, I'm not great, but okay. When the dawn finally came, pale and washing gray over the curtains, it felt like a promise. That night would end, that fear wouldn't hold. I stood by the window with coffee in hand, watching white light pool on the pavement. I felt steady again, though my heart still thudded. I opened the front door and stood in the morning air. It was cool and damp. I inhaled and let my shoulders loosen. I told myself, I did something stupid. I survived it. I'm here. It's days later now. I think of the bridge still, but it doesn't pull at me anymore. I picture it, cracked concrete, dark water below, edges flaking, and I feel thankful I left. I feel proud, in a quiet way, that I was brave, but also that I turned away when the forest felt too alive, too hungry. I learned that fear isn't only about what's out there. A forest isn't evil, and neither am I. Fear is something inside that tells you how much you value safety, belonging, home. That night taught me something simple. When sliding towards something that scares you, when your heart says that thrill, that rush, is worth the risk, listen. But also, listen when your heart pounds because it wants you to live. I am here. No ghosts haunted that forest. No monsters. Just something old and quiet, and me choosing to leave. I've stopped pushing that edge of risk. I still walk the woods, but only on trails I know. I walk without wanting to be anywhere, but now, without chasing a rush. I learned the feeling of being alone, too close to something wide and wild. That feeling stays with me, but it doesn't rule me anymore. And every time I remember that night, I remember how sunrise felt. I remember that I came back. I remember that I'm okay. I never thought the road home could feel so unreal, so distant, and yet pull on me like a weight. I set out from the office just after midnight because I had paperwork to finish, and I told myself that the highway would be empty and peaceful. But as soon as I stepped into the car, I realized something was off. The air was thick, humid, even though the summer night should have cooled a bit by then. My hands clutched the steering wheel, knuckles pale, as the headlights pierced the darkness ahead. The road seemed straighter than I remembered longer. Every mile marker back home should have passed by quick, but that night, they came one by one slow. I tried to keep my mind busy. I thought about dinner, about collapsing into bed, about how everything tomorrow would feel routine again. But around the 6th mile, I saw a patch of gravel along the shoulder. It didn't click. Only when I passed it did I slow, startled, because my tire scraped, a low shudder going through the front of the car, and I felt the pop of puncture. I pulled over. The light from my headlights lit up the cracked asphalt, and a thin mist hovering low, so low I could almost touch it if I leaned out the window. I stepped out, eyeing the road behind me. Nothing. No one. Just the dark ribbon winding back toward the city lights I'd just come from. And ahead, just black. I crouched beside the flat tire, pressed my fingers around the rubber, looking for the tear. I found a long, clean gash, like something sharp had cut through. I looked around. No nails, no broken glass, nothing on the road. Just gravel. The mist curled over the shoulder, hiding what lay beyond. I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't know if I should fix it or try to call for help. My phone had one bar. I tried. No signal. Panic threaded through me, but I took a breath. I opened the trunk, pulled out the spare tire and jack. Hands shaking, I began to jack up the car. Every sound felt amplified. The humming distant hum of tires maybe, my own breathing, the click and groan of metal. My phone buzzed once. I looked down. A message. Need help. From an unknown number. I stared at it. Was that someone watching me? I typed back without thinking. Who? The reply came fast. You're not safe. Keep going. My follow-up. Where are you? No reply. I swiped my finger. Nothing. My stomach twisted. I slammed the phone shut. I felt watched. The mist, which was still there, started drifting toward me. It seemed to move like a living thing, folding over the edge of the road. I fumbled with the lug nuts, cursed the strangers on the road, cursed whoever sent that text. Just as I loosened the final nut, headlights appeared in my mirror, a car inching up, cautious. Headlights off, but high beams dunked the road in harsh light. A figure stepped out of the passenger side, tall, lanky, coat hanging off, boots heavy. The person stood a distance away, watching. My heart slammed. I fumbled with the wheel. The stranger took a step toward me. My jaw clenched. I didn't want to yell. What would I do if I did? Instead, I stood, brushing dirt off my palms. The stranger walked forward, silent, pacing behind my car. My mind screamed, "Why are you here?" I thought of running back into the car, slamming the door. But my legs felt rooted. The stranger stopped. I saw their face only when a passing car's headlights flickered across, hollow eyes. Not a creature, not supernatural, but their gaze froze me. Then they stepped closer. I froze. They raised their phone. My throat closed. They didn't speak. I backed up. My elbow hit the spare tire. It dropped, rims hitting hard, ringing out in the night. The stranger turned away, walking back to the vehicle, slipping inside. I dared to breathe, stood shivering. Was I imagining it? The neighbor car pulled forward and past me, no lights, just disappearing around the bend. I grabbed my phone again. One bar still dead. I wrapped my arms around myself. I felt tiny in that empty stretch. I stared at my flat tire, at the loose lug nuts. In front of me, the stranger's car glowed with headlights on now, engine idling. Brakes squealed, tires rose. Then the car moved ahead slowly, turned around, and parked behind me. That was it. Now I was trapped. I slammed the jack down, wrenched the spare off, and lunged for the driver's seat. As I climbed in, tires squealed on gravel. Behind me, headlights turned on. I fumbled with locking the doors. My foot slammed on the pedal. I floored it. The engine roared. I hear gasps in my own head, reflex. The car lurched forward. I stayed on the shoulder, hair whipping around my face, mist swirling. Behind, I heard gravel crunch, felt them accelerating. My car rattled. I concentrated on moving forward. Mile after mile, roadside reflectors streaking by. My chest felt tight. I must have thought I saw taillights flicker in my mirror, but I kept going. The mist thinned. The black prison behind me started giving way to the dull glow of streetlights ahead. Then a sign. City limits, welcome back. I exhaled like I was drowning. The stranger car didn't follow onto the lit road. I dared a glance in the mirror, empty street. Only my breath, and the engine's hum kept me company. I slowed, hands trembling. My eyes flicked around the city edge, neon signs, open store lights, other cars, life happening. I pulled into the first open gas station. I parked under a bright lamp, leaving the engine idling. My hands shook too hard to grip the phone. I looked around. There was a clerk behind the glass, bright uniform. I got out, legs unsteady, walked behind the glass and told them I had a flat, asked to use a phone. No words to describe what happened. Just, something's wrong. Can I call someone? They nodded, worried. The clerk handed me the phone. My friend answered. I whispered the address. He dropped everything and came. I called the police as well, my hands still shaking. By the time the tow truck came, I was shivering in a blanket. The police took my statement. I told them just the facts, no ghosts, no other them. They asked if I was hurt, if I saw someone. I said yes, I saw a person. They made a report. I watched the camera feed from the station as they rewound, but the footage showed only my car, the empty dark road. No looming figure. I think my jaw hung open. The tape cut before and after. There was no proof of anyone else. I felt hollow. The police said they'd patrol that stretch more, check past calls. They were kind. I nodded. My friend drove me home and made me soup. We stayed in the kitchen. The streetlights outside cast long bars across the room. I told him I didn't know what happened, that I felt real fear, that it wasn't fairy tale but flesh and bone and something I couldn't explain. He held my hand. I felt safe, for the first time since the highway. Weeks passed. I tried going back to that road, but something held me back. I looked up accident reports. There was nothing unusual. No calls. No missing persons. Nothing about a stranger cutting tires. I used other routes. I felt lighter every morning that I didn't have to face the empty stretch. One afternoon, I drove past that same road on the freeway, thinking maybe, just to lay it to rest. I saw that shoulder. I thought I might stop, but something stopped me. I moved on. The road stayed behind me, asphalt dull and silent. That night, I slept. I dreamed of headlights and mist, disposable, unreal. I woke up calm. Real fear had its claws ripped out. I went about my day. Coffee, work, lunch with friends. It felt normal again. Some days later, I found a pack of maps dated to the road. I pinned them in my closet. One map had a dot marking the shoulder where I'd gone flat. Under it, someone, a policeman, had circled it and written "check again" in neat pen. I stared at it. Maybe I hadn't imagined everything. But that day, I didn't feel scared. I felt resolved. Because I was alive. Because I'd let the city lights bring me back. And because I'd opened the door to friends' help. I tucked the map away and thought, fear is a signal, not a sentence. And I'd made it back, for real this time. I never meant to get lost in the woods. It happened slowly, without me noticing until I was already deep inside. I had driven to the edge of town just after dusk, because I wanted to walk under trees and breathe in fresh air after too many nights cooped up inside. I took a narrow dirt path that looked well-worn. At first, the tall pines and birch trees overhead gave me a comfortable sense of cover, softening the evening light. I could hear the wind whispering through needles, birds chirping from hidden perches. The air changed. The sun sank fast, and shadows stretched long over the path. I thought I would make it back before darkness fell, but at some point the trail forked into smaller, twisting trails that all looked the same. I made a bad choice and followed one that seemed straighter, but it curved unexpectedly and grew steeper. My heart began to beat faster. I was already tense from having lost sight of the path I had come in on, the shapes of trees that I thought I knew kind of blending together. I didn't bring a flashlight. I thought it wasn't needed. That was a mistake. As I walked, the last bits of daylight faded. Suddenly I was in thick dusk, and the forest all around me looked darker by the second. The rustle of branches, the occasional snap of twigs underfoot, everything felt louder, sharper. The wood smoke scent from a distant fire pit drifted on a faint breeze, and then vanished, replaced by the earth-rich smell of damp needles and moss. My own breath sounded loud in my ears. I realized I was afraid to stop walking, because if I did, I'd freeze in place and maybe never move again. I kept going, picking one path after another when the trail split. Every route led deeper, and each seemed just as unmarked as the last. I listened for cars or voices, but all I heard was wind and forest sounds. I felt alone and small, far from safety. My phone was dead, drained battery. I'd been careless, using it for photos and navigation without checking the power. I cursed myself for that. Darkness closed in. It felt physical, like thick velvet pressing down. When I reached a small clearing, the moon had come out, just enough to light up white bark of some birch trees. Silver beams fell on low ferns, dappling the ground. Then I heard something that made my skin crawl. A low crack, like something heavy shifting branches. Not an animal, but too big for a deer. My heart thumped. I froze, every nerve taut. My eyes strained to see shapes in the dark. I thought I saw movement on the edge of the clearing, between trees. Maybe a person, maybe not. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks, exhaustion and fear doing that. I started inching backward quietly, trying not to breathe too loudly. The wind sighed around me. The crack happened again, nearer this time. And then another. Something was coming closer, something solid. My mind raced. A bear? A wild hog? I'd never dealt with anything like that. I forced myself to calm down, told myself to find a stick, something to defend myself. I scanned the ground, found a fallen branch, gnarled and thick. I held it in front of me. A shape stepped into the clearing. It was a person, clad in a dark jacket and jeans. I couldn't see their face. They stopped a few yards away, silent. I sank back, trembling. I didn't want trouble. I didn't want to make them chase me. I didn't step toward them. Neither did they step toward me. The forest felt impossibly still. Branches above creaked as wind came through. The person turned and moved off quietly between the trees, back into the darkness. I watched them go until they vanished. I didn't know if they meant harm or were just another lost soul. My throat felt tight. I gripped the branch so hard it cut into my palm. I waited, listening. Nothing but night and forest. I decided I had to move. Stay in place and I'd freeze, get lost, or something worse. So I headed out, blinded by blackness, unsure of direction. I moved slowly, touching tree trunks to guide myself. The forest floor was uneven, roots and moss, and wet leaves making every step risky. I stumbled once and twisted my ankle. Sharp pain that shot up my leg. I bit back a cry, slid down to sit on a moss bank. The cold damp seeped through my jeans. Panic clawed at me. What had I done coming here without planning? I forced myself to breathe. I set a plan. I'd follow one tree line that seemed to slope down, hoping it led back to road or town. I limped forward, brushing against trunks. The air got colder, moist. My breath came out in white puffs. After a long while, I began to hear something, a distant hum, like tires on pavement, or maybe a generator. I stopped. I listened. Yes, there was sound. It wavered, faint. Hope. I forced my mind not to derail. Step by careful step, I made my way toward it. My ankle burned, but adrenaline pushed me on. After maybe half an hour, time lost all meaning. I broke through tree cover to a gravel road. I knelt there, legs shaking, and tears came. I looked in both directions. One way, the road curved and vanished in darkness. The other way, if I headed downward, I thought I'd reach lights soon. I started walking, limping painfully. Gravel crunched under shoes. Everything was silent except my steps. Then I saw lights. Far, faint, but there. Finite. I kept going, and slowly, I could make them out as streetlights and a house at the curve. A single house on a quiet country road. A porch light glowed warm. I didn't stop, but forced my foot forward until I came close enough to see a car in the driveway. I rang the porch light courtesy button, fumbling on my hands and knees, mud on my palm and grass in my hair. A moment later, footsteps, then the door opening. A middle-aged woman in pajamas peered out. Her voice calm and kind, she asked if I was okay. I couldn't speak at first, but when I did, I croaked that I was lost and hurt. Her face went soft. She helped me inside without fuss. She gave me a blanket and ice for my ankle and water. I told her I'd walked into the woods and got lost. She nodded knowingly. Sometimes people drift in off those paths. She called the county sheriff with her phone. While waiting, I realized I was filthy, dirt under my nails, leaves in my hair, and a strong smell of pine on my clothes. I wanted to shower right away, but the woman told me food and rest first, then a warm bath. She gave me soup and bread, something simple and warm that felt like kindness in a bowl. The burning in my ankle receded with painkillers she offered. She said paramedics were on their way, but I shook my head. I'd just walk back to town in the morning or get driven. I was okay in a good way. I hadn't been just minutes before. In the glow of the lamp, sipping soup, wrapped in a blanket, I felt safe again. The dark forest world fell away. The night outside felt far, and human hospitality was there. She let me call a friend with her phone. I told the friend I'd been lost, and they arranged to come get me in the morning. I spoke quietly, leaning back, feeling grateful. When I finally stood up, I could walk on my ankle slowly. Not fully steady, but stable. The woman led me to the guest room she'd prepared in back. Clean sheets and the quiet. I lay down and sleep came easily, deeply. The next morning, light filtered through pale curtains. My friend arrived, and I hobbled down with aid. I hugged the woman and thanked her. She smiled softly. She said sometimes people just need a hand when they are in the dark. I told her I'd remember what she did always. She waved gently as I left. Back in my car, heading home, I felt the memory of fear shift into something else. Humility, gratitude, a fierce awareness of how quickly things can go wrong, and also how much good there can be in people. I drove slowly, mindful of every bump, the forest now behind me, but the lesson stayed. I'd never again go half prepared. But more than that, I'd never forget the warmth of a stranger's help, how kindness can turn a night of terror into a story that ends safe, sure, human. I woke up before dawn, to the low hum of the highway outside my bedroom window. The curtains, thin and faded, let in the dull glow of street lamps, casting long, pale lines across my walls. I stared at the ceiling for a while, feeling the rhythm of the hum in my bones. I could smell coffee from the kitchen downstairs, already brewed and waiting. I should have been happy. I should have been grateful. But the air in the house felt heavy, like a page I had skipped in a book I was reading. Something had shifted. I slipped out of bed quietly, stepping onto the cold wooden floor. My heart pounded, not because I was scared yet, but because I felt a beat of unease. The whole house was still, except for the old refrigerator in the kitchen that hummed steadily, lights blinking. The coffee smelled rich. I should have taken a sip, but I didn't. Instead, I walked through the hallway, toes brushing along the rug, listening for anything out of place. The hallway was long and narrow. My apartment is on the edge of town, old bricks and thin walls. At times, distant sirens bounce off the corners of each room, flipping through rooms like loose papers scattered in the wind. I felt the ache in my chest tighten with each echo of sound. I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. The mirror was fogged from humidity, even though it was early. I wiped it with the inside of my wrist and stared at my reflection. My face looked drawn, eyes wide, ringed with dark circles, lips pressed tight. I didn't recognize myself. I looked exhausted. I dressed in quiet, practical clothes, a pair of worn jeans, an old t-shirt, a sweater that smelled of laundry detergent. Outside, the air was cool and damp. I went out onto the balcony, the rail chilled under my hand. I watched the highway. Cars cut through the darkness, headlights blurred by fog. I thought of how many people were in their cars, asleep or restless, unaware of the weight of the night pressing around me. Later, I walked to the kitchen. I took a slow sip of coffee. Strong. Bitterness rolled across my tongue, then settled warm in my chest. I sat at the small table, the one that had a chipped corner and a single drawer where I kept bills and junk mail. I stared at a letter, an envelope I had closed that very morning, and sat there. I couldn't bring myself to open it. I just stared. The minutes passed. Daylight seeped under the curtains. The hum steady, the coffee gone cold. I finally got up, put on my jacket, grabbed my phone. The plan was to walk to the train station, to get away from the claustrophobia of the apartment. Maybe to pretend that if I moved farther, I could keep the darkness at bay. My legs ached, tired too, but I stepped out into the hallway, then down the stairs, each slatted squeak like protest. Outside, I inhaled fresh air, sharp with that clean promise mornings have. The street was empty. A stray cat slunk under a car for damp. I watched it go. Then I started walking, boots tapping on the sidewalk. The fog lifted. The world brightened. On the way, I passed shuttered shops, plastic sheets fluttering behind metal gates. A bakery that smelled of yeast and sugar when it was open. A corner store window blank and unlit. The world looked like felt, muted in gray haze. As I crossed the street to the station, I heard footsteps behind me. Not hurried, slow, even-paced. I didn't turn. My stomach nodded, every nerve ready to flare. The footsteps continued. My heart kicked. I walked faster, ignoring them at first. But then I heard them match my stride. I glanced, saw a figure in a hooded jacket, face hidden in shadow. I could feel breath catch in my throat. Without breaking stride, I turned onto another street, deeper into the maze of alleys that fringe this part of the city. I kept going, weaving between buildings of worn brick, paint peeling. The footsteps continued, relentless. My lungs burned. Sweat glistened on my temple. I kept going. I could hear sirens now, closer, layered over the dull thrum of street noise. I saw the station ahead, bright lights, people milling. I broke into a trot. The footsteps behind me sped up. I burst into the station, doors sliding shut behind me with a whoosh. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding so loud I thought it might tear free. I looked around, people reading phones, sipping coffee, waiting, oblivious to me, to what had just happened. My breath came in ragged whoops. The station smells of cleaning products, stale air, and the faint bite of steel rails. I watched my hands shake. I checked the board. Next train in 8 minutes. I forced myself to move. I walked to a bench, sat down, knees quivering. Every sound echoed. People cleared throats, shuffled papers. A suitcase wheels by, wheels click-clack, footsteps and whispers all around. I closed my eyes. The minutes were long. My body tense, waiting. Finally, an announcement. A train rattled in. Doors hissed. I stood, pushing off the bench. I stepped on board fast, found a seat. The door slid shut behind me, sealing off the station. Everything changed. The hum of the engine was low and steady. The lights flickered above. The unknown presence gone. Only distance now between me and the street, the dark, and that stride behind me. I stared at my hands, reminding myself they were mine. I was alive, not broken. The train shook and then pulled away. Out the window, the station shrank. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, looking at tracks that disappeared into the morning. I felt breath come easier. I thought about the letter in the apartment. Maybe that's what I was afraid of. Not the stranger, not the dark. It was that letter, sealed and waiting, not yet read. The unknown inside. But the walk, the chase, it made me see I couldn't stay. I couldn't hide. I needed to open it, face it. It was fear talking, telling me silence is safer. But I knew silence doesn't heal. I rode the train until the city tumbled away. Buildings low, then farms, wide fields, soft yellows and greens under early sunlight. The world looked bigger, kinder, somehow. I wrapped my arms around my chest to hold myself. The hum of wheels on track was small comfort. I reached my stop, stepped off. The air was open now, birds calling, wind light. I walked until I found a park, wet grass and trees. I sat on a bench again, the letter warm in my pocket. I stared at it. Fear buzzed, but it was quieter now. I breathed deeper. Then I took the letter out. No one was watching. I opened it. Inside was a letter from my friend, her handwriting curled in black ink. She'd written about her trip abroad, about how much she missed me, how sorry she was she hadn't answered my calls. She'd been meaning to call. She wanted to see me. She hoped things were okay. She included a photo of us from years ago, at a crowded fair, smiles wide, dirt under our nails, eyes bright. A memory. And that letter, soft paper in my hands, turned everything warm. The fear drained. The darkness peeled away. I sat there in the park, sunshine filtering through leaves, the letter in my lap, and I felt the weight lift, the knot inside me loosen. I thought of home, and how it could be good again. I thought of the clamor of worry, and how love, friendship, simple kindness open the door you fear. I thought about walking back, opening windows, letting fresh air chase away what had settled. I pictured calling her, letting my voice quiver for a moment, then steady. So I stood up. I folded the letter and held it close, a promise held in paper. I walked out of the park into the morning. The light was gentle, the air easier now. I felt ready, not perfect, but ready. And that was enough. I didn't even want to go on the trip in the first place. I'm not the kind of person who finds joy in silence or empty places. But I told myself that maybe I needed it. Maybe it would clear my head. Things had been piling up for months. Work stress, bills, small fights with friends that added up to distance. A strange weight in my chest that wouldn't go away no matter how long I lay awake at night. So I packed my stuff and left the city. I found a cabin up north, tucked in the woods near a small lake. It was about a 3-hour drive and far enough from the main roads that I had to take a gravel path for nearly 20 minutes before reaching it. The listing online said it had solar power, a water tank, and even a wood stove. I figured I could spend 5 or 6 days there, maybe fish a little, read a book, take walks, and do all the things people are always saying they want to do when they disconnect. When I arrived, the air was different. Crisp, clean, and dead quiet. I stood by my car for a moment and looked around. Trees in every direction, thick and tall, with no sound except for a few birds calling far away. The cabin was small and plain. Weathered wood, a tin roof, 1 door, 2 windows, and a chimney. The lake sat just 100 feet behind it, calm and still, with thin reeds poking out near the edge and tiny bugs skipping across the surface. I unpacked, set up my stuff inside, checked the solar battery monitor. It was charged and tried the lights. Everything worked. I tested the little propane burner, checked the water tank behind the cabin, and looked around for any tools or wood. Everything was simple and clean, but nothing fancy. Just how I'd expected. The first day was easy. I sat on the porch for a long time, doing nothing. My phone had no signal, which made me nervous at first, but I knew it was coming. I kept checking it anyway, like a reflex. By evening, I made myself some soup from a can and sat by the lake as the sun dipped behind the trees. I watched the sky turn orange and then fade to dark. I could hear insects chirping and something splashing every now and then in the water, probably frogs or fish. I wasn't used to it, but I told myself it was normal. Nature was supposed to sound like that. The second day, I went for a walk. There was a trail off to the east side of the cabin, mostly flat and wide enough to follow. It looked like animals used it more than people, but it was clear enough to walk. I took my flashlight, a bottle of water, and a snack just in case I lost track of time. The trees went on forever. After about an hour, I stopped and looked back. I couldn't see the cabin, only trees. It hit me then how alone I really was. I tried to shake it off and keep walking, but I didn't like the way it made my chest feel tight. That night I couldn't sleep. The cabin creaked. I knew wood did that, expanding and shrinking with temperature. But every sound felt too sharp. I heard tapping once, right before midnight. Not like knocking, more like something brushing lightly against the side of the cabin. I got up, checked the windows, looked out, saw nothing. I stood there for a while, breathing slowly, trying to hear it again. But it stopped. I told myself it could have been wind or a branch. I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until I passed out. The third day I felt off. I couldn't explain it, just an itch in my skin and a heaviness in my stomach. I stayed close to the cabin, read part of a book I brought, sat by the lake again. I thought I saw movement in the trees across the water, but every time I looked up, there was nothing. Just trees swaying. No birds that day either, now that I think about it. The woods were too quiet. Later that afternoon, I went to check the water tank and saw something that made my mouth go dry. There were marks in the dirt near the back wall of the cabin. Not boot prints, not shoes. Just long, shallow grooves like something had been dragged. Not deep, but visible. They stretched about 10 feet, then stopped near a small tree. I bent down and looked closer. The ground was too dry to hold much detail, but the marks were recent. The leaves and dust around them hadn't blown back over. I stood there for a long time, staring at them. My brain kept trying to come up with answers. Maybe an animal, maybe something slid down from the roof. Maybe I did it somehow without realizing. But I couldn't make it fit. That night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I stayed up with my flashlight in my hand and the small hatchet I found hanging on the wall. Every sound made me flinch. There were a few times I thought I heard footsteps outside, slow and steady, circling the cabin. But whenever I leaned close to the window, it stopped. There was never anything there. I didn't open the door. I told myself not to be stupid. When morning finally came, I opened the door and stepped out. The air was cold and still. I walked around the cabin slowly, checking every corner. Nothing. No marks in the dirt this time. No sign of anything. But something felt different. I can't explain it exactly. Just a feeling, like being watched. I tried to brush it off, but it stayed in the back of my mind. The fourth day, I decided to leave the trail and go further into the woods. I don't know why. Maybe I just wanted to prove something to myself, like I wasn't scared. I brought more supplies this time. I marked a tree near the cabin with my knife, so I wouldn't lose my place. I walked for hours. The trees started to look the same. The trail disappeared behind me, and I realized I hadn't marked enough. I turned to go back, but every direction looked wrong. I kept telling myself not to panic, to look for landmarks, but nothing stood out. The sky was getting darker through the canopy. Eventually, I found my own boot prints in the dirt. That saved me. I followed them back, step by step, until I saw the tree I had marked. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I made it back to the cabin and almost collapsed on the porch. My legs were shaking. I didn't eat dinner that night. I just sat by the window, watching the edge of the woods until the stars came out. The next morning, my fifth day, I found something on the porch. A small pile of rocks. Not random. Stacked. 5 stones, carefully balanced, right in front of the door. They hadn't been there the night before. I would have seen them. They weren't from the ground nearby either. The stones around the cabin were a different color and shape. These were smooth and dark, almost black like river rocks. I didn't touch them. I stood there staring for a long time. My skin felt like it was buzzing. I looked around, scanning the trees. Nothing. No sound. No birds. Just that thick, dead silence. That was when I decided I needed to leave. I went back inside, packed up quickly, loaded the car. I turned the key. Nothing. It didn't even try to turn over. Just silence. I tried again. Same result. The car had been working fine. I had barely driven it. The battery was fine. I checked under the hood, tried every basic trick I knew, but it was dead. Completely. Like something had drained it dry. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat with my back against it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I had no way to call for help. No one knew exactly where I was. I had told a friend the general area, but not the exact spot. It hit me then how stupid that was. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out. The pile of rocks was still there. At one point, around 2 a.m., I saw something move between the trees. A tall shape. Thin. Upright. But not walking like a person. More like swaying. Just for a second. Then gone. I stayed frozen in place until the sun came up. On the 6th day, I started thinking about walking out. I knew the gravel road was about 5 or 6 miles away. It would take a few hours, but I could do it. I packed water, snacks, the flashlight, the hatchet. I kept telling myself I could make it. But when I opened the door, the rocks were gone. Just gone. No marks. No scattered stones. Like they'd never been there. I stepped off the porch and looked around. That buzzing feeling was back, stronger now, crawling under my skin like electricity. I didn't hear anything. No wind. No birds. No insects. Just dead silence. I started walking toward the gravel road. I tried to keep my pace steady, but I was moving fast. The woods felt closer now, like the trees were leaning in. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every few minutes I stopped and turned around, but I never saw anything. At one point, I thought I heard breathing. Not mine. Deep, slow, and just behind me. I spun around, nothing. I kept walking. Eventually, I saw the break in the trees that led to the gravel road. I almost cried. I ran the last stretch. When my boots hit the gravel, I collapsed to my knees and just sat there. I walked for almost an hour along the gravel road until a ranger truck came around the bend. I stood in the middle of the road and waved both arms like a maniac. The driver stopped and rolled down the window. I didn't say much, just asked for a ride back to the main road. I didn't tell him about the rocks or the sounds or the marks. I didn't say anything about the tall shape or the silence or the dead car. I just said the cabin gave me the creeps and I wanted out. He didn't ask much. Maybe he didn't want to know. I made it home that night. I left the car. I never went back for it. A month later, I paid a tow service to haul it out. They said it was fine. No battery issue, nothing drained. No reason it shouldn't have started. But I knew better. I didn't argue. I've never gone back to the woods since. I stay in the city now. I keep my phone charged, my doors locked, and my windows closed at night. Sometimes, though, when everything is quiet, I remember that silence. That heavy, thick silence where even the birds won't sing. And I swear I can still feel that buzzing under my skin, like something never really let me go. I was driving across the state on a long, flat highway that seemed to stretch forever. It was late afternoon when I started the drive, and I knew I wouldn't make it home until sometime after midnight. I had done this route before, but this time I was feeling more tired than usual. I hadn't slept well the night before, and the steady hum of the engine and the heat from the sun made it harder to stay alert. Still, I had to push through. The road was empty for long stretches, just desert and dry fields on both sides. The sun slowly dipped down as I passed the halfway mark. The sky turned a mix of orange and red, and then eventually gray. I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, between two tiny towns, when the sun finally disappeared. The highway lights were rare, and the only thing lighting my way was my own headlights. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. Low battery. I didn't have a charger with me. I thought about stopping at the next gas station, but I hadn't seen one in miles, and my tank was still half full. I figured I'd make it without needing to stop. The road sign said the next town was about 70 miles away. I kept driving. After another 30 minutes, I noticed something strange. A white sedan was behind me. Not tailgating or flashing lights or anything, but it had been there for a while, always keeping the same distance. Every time I glanced in the mirror, it was still there. I slowed down slightly, and it slowed too. I sped up, it did the same. There were no exits or turns for a long while, so I couldn't tell if it was just going the same way as me, or if it was following me. I kept my eyes on the mirror more than the road. The distance between us never changed. It was too steady, too perfect. I turned off the music, so I could concentrate. The night felt heavier. I hadn't seen another car coming the other way in what felt like an hour. No buildings, no signs, nothing. Just darkness, and that one car behind me. After another 10 miles, I decided to pull over onto a small turnout on the side of the road. I figured maybe if it passed me, I could stop worrying. I slowed down and pulled onto the gravel. The car behind me slowed too. I stopped. The white sedan stopped too. Not close behind me, but back a ways, still on the road. Its headlights stayed on. It didn't move. I waited a few minutes. Nothing. No one got out. No honks. Just sitting there. I started to feel something crawling under my skin. My chest felt tight. I put the car back in drive and pulled back onto the road. The white sedan followed. Same pace, same distance. I started thinking maybe I was just tired and imagining the worst. But it didn't feel right. I hadn't seen a car in miles, and now this one had stuck behind me for over an hour. I tried calling someone, but my phone died right after I unlocked the screen. Black. Useless. I dropped it on the passenger seat. I drove faster. Not speeding like crazy, but enough to see if they'd match it. They did. I kept driving, heart beating faster. I needed to find a place to stop where there were people. But there were no lights on the horizon, no signs of a town or even a gas station. Just black road, yellow stripes, and empty silence. About 15 minutes later, I saw a small dirt road leading off to the left. No sign, no lights, just a path. I made a sudden turn onto it without using my signal, hoping to throw them off. I sped down the dirt path, dust kicking up behind me. It was bumpy and narrow, with brush scraping against the sides of my car. After about half a mile, I stopped and killed the engine. I turned off the lights. Total darkness. I sat there, heart pounding, listening. My windows were down a few inches, and the air was hot and still. I waited. A few minutes passed. Then I saw it. Headlights, slowly moving down the road I had turned off. The same white sedan, crawling along the dirt path, coming straight toward me. I could barely breathe. I turned the key and started the car again. I couldn't see anything behind me, but I reversed anyway, tires spinning slightly in the loose dirt. I turned the car around and sped back toward the highway, hoping to get out before they blocked the path. I hit the pavement again and floored it. I didn't look back right away. I just drove. Then I glanced in the mirror. Headlights behind me again. Same distance. Still there. I drove for what felt like an hour with them behind me. The next town couldn't be far now. I just had to keep going. Then I saw it, a green sign, 12 miles to Pine Flat. A small town, but better than nothing. I kept driving, counting down every mile. When I finally saw the lights of the gas station on the edge of town, I didn't hesitate. I pulled in fast, parked right near the front doors, and jumped out. I looked back. The white sedan passed by on the highway without slowing down. Just kept going. I stood there, staring after it, waiting for it to turn around. But it didn't. Just disappeared down the road. I went inside the station. It was mostly empty. I used their charger station to get my phone powered on. I didn't even care about calling anyone anymore. I just needed to calm down. I sat there for a while, watching cars come and go. I didn't see the sedan again. Eventually, I got back in my car and finished the drive home. No one followed me after that. I told myself it was probably just someone driving the same route who didn't even realize how creepy it looked. But deep down, I knew better. They had followed me onto that dirt road. They stopped when I stopped. They kept the same distance for miles. No normal driver does that. I never saw the car again. But now, every time I drive a long stretch of highway at night, I check the mirror more often than I should. I never let my phone battery run low anymore. And I always bring a charger. Because you never know who might be behind you in the dark, and you never know what they want. I don't know why I agreed to help him. He wasn't even that close of a friend, just someone I knew through mutual friends. But he asked if I could help him move some stuff out of his late uncle's place, an old house out in a rural area I had never heard of before. He said his uncle passed away recently, and the family needed to clear out the property. It was one of those odd situations where they couldn't sell the land until everything was removed. Sounded simple enough. One day of lifting, packing, and probably throwing away junk. We met early in the morning at a gas station on the edge of town, then followed a long, winding road deep into the countryside. I could tell right away we were headed somewhere really out of the way. The trees on both sides of the road started getting thicker, and the cell signal dropped to nothing. The road turned to gravel, then to dirt. There weren't any houses around, just empty fields and forest. Finally, we pulled into the overgrown driveway of the property. The house was old, not falling apart, but definitely neglected. 2 stories, wooden siding that had gone gray with time, shutters hanging off their hinges, weeds growing up to the windows. There was a barn too, a little ways back behind the house, with a collapsed roof and rusted equipment lying around it. Everything had that smell of dry rot, mold, and earth that old buildings get when they're left alone for too long. We started with the house. Most of the furniture was still inside. Chairs, a sofa, a kitchen table with only 2 legs still attached. Drawers were full of old tools, batteries, papers, some of it totally ruined from time and moisture. We spent hours loading the usable stuff into the truck. It wasn't fun work, but it was quiet and uneventful. Around midday, we took a break and ate in the truck, watching the trees sway in the breeze. It was weird how quiet it was. No cars, no people, just wind and birds. After lunch, he said we should check the barn. Most of it was junk, he figured, but there might be tools or scrap that someone in the family could use. I followed him as we walked around the back of the house toward the barn. The air felt different there, still heavier somehow. The barn sat low in a dip in the land, surrounded by tall trees. The sunlight didn't reach it properly. The shadows stretched across the roof like fingers. I tried to ignore how uneasy I felt. We stepped inside. It smelled worse than the house. Animal droppings, rotting wood, something else I couldn't place. Maybe mold or stagnant water. The floor creaked under every step, and some of the boards bowed under our weight. We were careful. The roof had caved in on one side, letting in a shaft of sunlight that lit up particles of dust hanging in the air. There were a few stalls, old shelves, broken furniture, and a heap of rusted tools in a corner. He started digging through a metal box, pulling out a few items. I wandered off to the other side, toward a stall door that was half open. Something had caught my eye. It looked like a large tarp or sheet bunched up on the ground. I stepped closer, trying to see. The tarp was thick, heavy-duty, and stained dark in several places. I reached down to shift it, and something under it clinked. I pulled the tarp aside slowly, and underneath it were several metal cages. Small ones, like the kind used for animals. They were rusted, bent in places, and inside one of them was a thick collar with a chain attached. The collar was too big for a dog. The chain was heavy. Thick links, the kind you'd use to tow a car. I stared at it, trying to make sense of why it would be here, why it would be in a cage. I reached for the collar. As I touched it, something sharp jabbed my finger. I yanked my hand back. There were small nails, almost like spikes, welded into the inner edge of the collar. Whoever wore that thing, it was meant to hurt them. I looked around and realized something else. The walls of this stall had deep gouges in them. Scratches, over and over again, carved into the wood. The kind an animal might make if it was trying to escape. But they were too high up and too uniform. I suddenly felt very cold. I stepped back, heart starting to race, and looked down at the floor. There were stains, dark ones, soaked deep into the wood. Some recent, some older. My breath caught in my throat. I turned back toward him. He was still sorting through tools, completely unaware. I called out, telling him to come look at what I found. He glanced up and wandered over, and when he saw the cage and collar, his face went pale. He didn't say anything, just stared. We didn't stay much longer in the barn. He said we had enough stuff loaded, and there wasn't much worth saving. I could tell he wanted to get out of there. So did I. We got back in the truck and started driving, neither of us saying much. As we left the property, I looked back once and saw the house disappearing behind the trees. On the way back, we finally talked. He admitted his uncle had been strange, kept to himself, had a rough past, spent time in prison when he was younger. No one ever said why. Lived alone for years. Family didn't visit. They thought he just liked the isolation. After that day, I didn't talk to him again. He messaged once to say thanks, and I never replied. But something started bothering me more and more. A few weeks later, I couldn't stop thinking about the barn. The collar, the cage, the scratches, the stains. So I started doing some digging, looking through local news articles, police reports, old forums. Took me days, but eventually I found something. Back in the late 90s, a girl went missing near that area. 13 years old. Never found. The search lasted months. Nothing came of it. A few years later, another report of a missing teenager. Then another. All of them lived within a 30-mile radius of that house. All disappeared without a trace. The cases were never linked. There just wasn't enough evidence. But I kept digging. The uncle had lived there since 1984. Quiet, off the grid. No neighbors. No visitors. The kind of place where no one would hear you scream. The more I found, the more convinced I became that something terrible had happened there. But the place was already being demolished. The family had decided to tear down both the house and barn, build something new, wipe the slate clean. So I never went back. But I think about it all the time. About how those scratches looked like fingernails, not claws. About how that collar was meant for someone who walked upright. About how that barn wasn't for storing animals or tools. It was for keeping something or someone locked up. I don't tell people about what I saw. No one would believe me. There's no proof. And even if there was, it's long gone now. But I can't shake the feeling that whatever happened in that barn didn't end with his uncle, and that I wasn't supposed to find it. I stayed awake too late that night. The light in my living room flickered when the bulb started dying, and I thought I saw a thin shadow drifting along the wall. I was tired and knew I shouldn't stay up, but something kept me rooted in place, eyes fixed on the wall as the thin line of darkness shivered and changed. I felt my heart thump in my chest. I had moved into the house a few months earlier. It was an old place, wooden floors that creaked underfoot, paint peeling on the windowsills, a cold draft that slipped in from the attic when the wind picked up. I told myself I would fix it, patch the paint, seal the windows, but life got busy. I worked until late, came home, ate, slept, went to work again. The house stood there, half forgotten, alive with quiet tensions. I heard creaking in the middle of the night. I told myself it was the wood settling. I heard footsteps, soft and slow, on the stairs when no one else lived in the house. I told myself it was the wind or some house quirk. But at midnight, I lay awake, senses tight, feeling I was not alone. That night, I turned on a small lamp beside the couch so the flicker of the main bulb wouldn't scare me. The lamp burned steadily, but I kept my eyes trained on that flickering light. My chest tightened whenever I looked away. I told myself it was all in my head. I stared and stared until the dark shape solidified into something that felt strange, heavy, and waiting. It wasn't a person or an animal, nothing I could name. Just a darkening of the space I knew well. I listened. Silence more solid than the dark. My skin felt clammy. I tried to push away the thought, there's nothing here. The next moment, I felt air shift, like a breath that wasn't mine brushing across the back of my neck. I shivered without moving. My arms stayed still at my sides. The lamp glowed in the corner, everything else quiet. The dark shape pulsed around the edges of my vision. I could not say how long I just sat there, scared to blink. The shape seemed to thicken, pressing toward me, weightless but heavy in intent. I felt the walls close in, the ceiling bear down, the floor tilt beneath me. Every noise in the house sent my heart spiking. The tapping drip of water from a loose pipe, the distant hum of traffic, the soft scurry of rats in the walls, all magnified. The dark shape seemed to seep into the cracks of light. I wanted to cry out, but I had nothing to say. No words. I waited with my mind frozen, thinking, just stay still, just stay quiet, don't move, don't breathe too hard. I remembered the wood panel above the fireplace. It was cracked, and I wondered how long that crack had been there. I thought of the attic stairs swaying, of the basement door I never fully shut. I thought of the wind rattling the porch boards outside, of the single dead tree at the far corner of the yard. All those small things left undone, half cared for, half ignored. In my mind they assembled into a scene of things left unfinished, unattended. The dark shape felt like all those things coming alive. Then the lamp flickered. Its light dimmed and pulsed. The darkness flicked back. My heart pounded. I realized I could stand up, walk to the lamp, unscrew the bulb, replace it. I could take control. My legs felt shaky, but I moved. Each step was measured. I rose from the couch, hands stiff. I walked slowly toward the lamp. The dark mass shrank back, as if expecting me to panic. But I tightened my jaw. I reached out, pressed the switch. Click. The light stayed on. Flicker gone. I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I held. In the sudden clarity of full light, the darkness dissolved. The room looked just like it always did. Tattered curtains, a couch with a few stains, books piled on the coffee table. I scanned the room, sure I'd see something emerge. But there was nothing that shouldn't be there. Just the familiar objects of my daily life lit plainly. My pulse raced, but the fear receded. I realized the shape had been inside me more than it was outside. Maybe it had been shadows against an anxious mind. Maybe it had been fear itself. Still, I stayed standing. The silence afterward seemed forgiving. I looked out the window. The dark yard, outlines of trees, distant streetlights. Nothing moved. No shape crouched just beyond visibility. I stepped back, my legs unknotted. I took a breath. I promised myself, tomorrow I'd repair the windowsill. I'd fix the crack in the fireplace panel. I'd shut the basement door fully, patch the attic entrance, sweep the porch and lean the plank where it rattled. I'd clean the house, banish the drafts. I'd fill the empty spaces with care. I sat back down and turned off the small lamp. I left the big bulb full on. The room glowed softly. My limbs finally relaxed. My breathing slowed. I thought, I am okay, and for the first time since the night began, I believed it with every cell. I made a silent plan. Tomorrow at first light, I'd go through each room, search for cracks and shadows. I'd act. Action would keep fear from growing in the corners. I'd paint over peeling edges, seal old drafts, tighten loose hinges, scrub the floors until they felt clean under my bare feet. I'd sweep the porch board and oil the squeaky hinge on the attic door. I felt calm. I felt responsibility. I felt peace. The faint hum of the street and the gentle draft through the aging windows did not unsettle me. They were not evil. They were just old wood and the passing wind. No strange presence lingered. I lay down, pillow soft under my head, blanket light over me. I felt entire, ready to fix, ready to act. Fear had visited me. Darkness had pressed close, but light and small steps had sent it back. I closed my eyes and slept. In the morning, dawn light filled the room without flicker or shadow. I rose, and I started to fix. First the windowsill, then floorboards, then attic and basement doors, then porch. One by one, I named the places where things went wrong and patched them. And as I worked, the house grew steadier. The creaks came less. The drafts softened. The sense of something drifting in the dark faded with each nail driven home, each board set right, each loose screw tightened. By evening, the house felt safe again. I sat with a cup of tea and looked around. I saw a place I had mended with my own hands. I felt proud. I felt clear. No more lurking silence. No more shape. Just a home, old, yes, but mine cared for, alive in its proper way. I woke up at 4:12 in the morning, wide awake for no reason. It wasn't hot. It wasn't cold. My body wasn't sore. I didn't need to pee, and nothing had startled me awake. It was just that sudden feeling of being completely alert, like my brain had already been running laps before I even opened my eyes. The room was still dark, except for the faint glow of a streetlight through the blinds. I live alone in a small one-bedroom house on a quiet road. Not much happens around here. That's why I like it. I stayed in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, trying to let the calm of the night settle me back into sleep. But my heart wouldn't slow down. It was steady, but beating just a little too fast. I tried to ignore it. I turned onto my side, then onto my stomach, then onto my back again. The sheets were comfortable, clean, soft. There was no reason I shouldn't be asleep. Still, I just couldn't. After what felt like half an hour, I got up. I figured I might as well get some water, maybe take a walk around the house. Sometimes movement helps. I shuffled out into the hallway barefoot. It was dark, but I knew the way. One step, then another, the sound of my feet on the hardwood floor soft and even. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. The light was brighter than I expected. It spilled across the floor in a perfect rectangle, casting long shadows. I took out the pitcher of filtered water, filled a glass, and drank slowly. The cold went down my throat sharp and clean. As I stood there, I heard a soft creak. Just one. Then nothing. Houses make noise. I know that. Wood settles. Pipes shift. Still, it made me freeze. The kind of freeze where your body forgets how to move. My hand was still holding the glass halfway to my mouth. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just listened. Nothing came after it. No footsteps, no voices, not even another creak. I finally took a breath and put the glass down. I told myself it was just the house, or maybe a breeze against the siding. I decided to check the front door anyway, just in case. Not because I was scared, just being cautious. I walked to the front door and checked the deadbolt. It was locked. I pressed my hand against the door, just to feel the solidness of it, then turned around to head back to bed. But when I turned, something in my gut dropped. My bedroom door was shut. I never shut that door. Ever. I live alone. There's no reason to. I liked the airflow, and I liked being able to see down the hallway from bed. But now, standing in the dim light of the kitchen, I could see that the door was completely closed. No light under it. No crack. Just shut. I stared at it for maybe a full minute. My brain went over every possible reason. Maybe I shut it without thinking. Maybe it drifted closed. Maybe I bumped it somehow. I tried to believe that. I really did. But the way it looked, so tightly closed, didn't sit right. I walked slowly down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last. I stopped a foot away from the door, my hand just above the knob. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to open it. But I had to. I took a deep breath and turned the knob slowly. The door opened smoothly. No creak. No resistance. The room was exactly as I left it. Bed untouched. Lights off. Window closed. Nothing looked out of place. But I still didn't step inside. I just stood there and looked. Then I backed away, step by step, and turned on every light in the house. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the couch with the TV on low volume, flipping through channels without really watching anything. Every hour, I checked the locks again. Every sound made me sit up straight. By morning, I was exhausted. My eyes burned. My brain felt foggy. But the sun was up. That helped. Things always feel better when it's light out. I made coffee, took a shower, got dressed, and told myself I'd just had a weird night. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe I never opened the door in the first place. Maybe I forgot. People forget things all the time. I left for work like normal, locked the house, and went through my day trying not to think about it. And by evening, I actually felt fine. A little tired, but fine. That night, I made sure everything was locked again. I checked the windows. I even set a chair under the door handle of the back door, just to be extra cautious. I left my bedroom door wide open and set a box against it, so I'd hear if it moved. I fell asleep sometime around midnight. At 3:46, I woke up again. This time, I didn't know why either. I opened my eyes and stared into the hallway. The box was still there. The door was still open. Everything was quiet. I felt more calm this time. I told myself it was probably just my body adjusting to stress. That after the weird night before, my brain was still on high alert. I closed my eyes and tried to drift off again. But then I heard it. That creak. The same one. Not loud. Not close. But not far either. I sat up in bed and listened. It didn't come again. I got out of bed and walked slowly down the hall, checking every room. Nothing was touched. Nothing moved. I opened the back door and looked outside. The chair was still there, still propped under the knob. But when I turned to go back inside, I noticed something small, something that wouldn't mean much to anyone else. My toothbrush was missing from the bathroom counter. I stood there staring at the empty spot. I hadn't used it yet that day. It had been there the night before. I always keep it in the same place, right next to the faucet. Now it was gone. I looked all over the bathroom. I checked the drawers, the trash, even behind the toilet. Nothing. I searched the bedroom, the living room, the kitchen. Still nothing. I didn't go to work that day. I called in sick and spent the whole morning going over everything in the house. I checked every cabinet, every closet, every space under the bed, every drawer. I even crawled under the house with a flashlight to check the foundation vents. No signs of anything, but the toothbrush was gone. Just gone. I changed the locks that afternoon. Bought new deadbolts, new window locks, even a cheap security camera and door sensors. I didn't care how paranoid it seemed. I needed to be sure. I needed to know if someone had gotten in. Maybe someone had a copy of the key. Maybe a contractor years ago. Maybe someone who used to live there. I installed everything before the sun went down. When I finally sat on the couch, the house felt more secure than it ever had. I watched the security cam feed on my phone and tested the sensors on every door and window. Everything worked perfectly. I went to bed that night, actually feeling a bit safer. My bedroom door stayed open. The hallway light was on. My phone was on the pillow next to me, camera feed live. I woke up again at 4:03. I checked my phone first. The feed was fine. No motion. No alert. I sat up and looked at the hallway. This time, it wasn't the door that caught my attention. It was the smell. Something sharp and chemical, almost like bleach or rubbing alcohol. Faint but wrong. I got out of bed and walked toward the smell. It got stronger near the kitchen. My feet made no sound. My heart pounded. When I reached the kitchen, the light was off, but I could still make out the shapes of things. The table, the sink, the edge of the fridge. The smell was stronger now. I flipped the light switch. On the table, sitting right in the middle, was my toothbrush. It was standing upright in a glass. The same glass I'd used for water 2 nights before. The toothbrush was clean, dry, like it had never been used. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at it. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. My body just locked up. I finally reached for the phone in my pocket and opened the camera feed. Nothing. Not a single blip. No alerts. No movement. The door sensors hadn't gone off. Everything was showing as untouched. I picked up the toothbrush with a paper towel, put it in a Ziploc bag, and drove to a motel across town. I stayed there for 3 days. When I came back, the house was exactly how I left it. No new smells. No strange items. Everything normal. But that normal didn't mean anything anymore. I replaced the security cameras with a better system, added a motion detector in the hallway, and put another one inside the kitchen. I even had a friend help me go over the crawl space, attic, and walls to look for hidden access points. Nothing. Just empty space and solid wood. I started keeping a log of everything. Every sound, every movement, every misplaced object. I took photos of every room before bed and compared them in the morning. And for 2 weeks, everything was quiet. Then one night, I found my TV remote sitting on the kitchen counter, even though I'd used it in the bedroom before falling asleep. A few nights later, I found my shoes placed neatly next to the front door instead of under the coat rack, where I always leave them. Then the security footage started showing gaps. Not motion, just missing time. The cameras would record fine, and then for 30 seconds or so, they'd go black. No error. No power outage. Just nothing. It never happened during the day. Only between 2 and 4 in the morning. I contacted the manufacturer. They said the system looked fine. The memory card was fine. No signs of tampering. No reason for the blackouts. I started staying awake during those hours. I'd sit in the living room, camera feed on one screen, door sensors on another. I watched the hallway, the kitchen, the front and back doors. And twice during the blackouts, I heard movement. Soft, careful steps. Like someone walking heel to toe on purpose. I never saw anything. The sounds would last a few seconds, then stop. I called the police once. I open my eyes in the dark. My room is colder than usual, and the air tastes faintly of damp concrete. My body aches all over. I lie still for a moment, trying to remember how I got here, but my mind is blank. The last clear memory I have is walking home after my shift at the small bakery. I had closed up that night, counting bread trays and wiping flour off my arms. The city streets were nearly empty. The humming streetlights flickered yellow over cracked pavement. I felt tired, heavy-eyed, eager for my warm bed. I remember the walk, the vacant storefronts, the hum of distant traffic, the sharp tang of oil from a nearby fryer. I must have taken a wrong turn. I must have tripped, fallen, and blacked out. Now I am somewhere unfamiliar, lying on a hard floor. I push myself up, every muscle and joint protesting, after what must have been hours, maybe more of stillness. My head pounds, dull and thumping, like the steady beat of a drum in a cave. As I begin to move, I notice the silence. It is so still that my own breathing seems loud. When I try to draw air, it tastes stale and musty. I am in a room that smells of old metal and rust, maybe damp plaster. I blink in the darkness, but there is not a single ray of moonlight, no street lamp filtering through. Only darkness. I stretch a hand forward, fingertips brushing cold concrete. I stand unsteady. My legs feel wobbly under me, but I force each step forward. Bit by bit, my eyes adjust, though the room remains dim. I make out rough walls, maybe made of exposed brick or concrete blocks, corners coated in peeling paint. A square window high on one wall. I can't make out glass, just a square outline where light doesn't reach. The floor is uneven, stained, pitted. A faint echo of dripping somewhere far off. Maybe water falling into a leftover puddle. I try to recall what day it is. I feel the faint imprint of time passing, the night growing older. I feel the weight of hours between consciousness and now. I don't know if I've been here for an hour or all day. My throat is dry, the inside of my mouth rough, sticky. I swallow, but there is no relief. Panic starts to rise in my chest, a tight coil. I breathe shallowly, tasting dust and worry. I remind myself, breathe slowly. Calm down, Find a way out. I search the walls with my hands, fingertips brushing cracks, crumbled mortar, rough edges, looking for a door. The floor rumbles faintly beneath me, maybe a small vibration, but could be only in my head. I follow the wall leftward, tracing it until I hit what feels like a metal frame. A door. My heartbeat quickens. I feel the cold metal beneath my palm. I try to push it. It gives. The door swings inward with a slow creak. Light from outside, a corridor long and empty, lit by grated ceiling lights that hum. I step through cautious, one foot in front of the other. Every detail registers. The smell of low electric hum, the faint scent of old wiring, a light buzzing overhead that makes my ears ring. The corridor stretches in both directions. One way disappears into shadows. The other ends in a door with a small window. Through it, I see faint daylight or streetlight, brighter than here but pale, distant. I leave the room behind and walk toward that light. Each step echoes softly in the corridor. My shoes scratch on concrete. My skin itches, dust or dry air. My shirt feels like paper against my skin, the only clothes I have. My muscles ache so much that I pause more than once just to breathe deeply. I wish for water. I wish for warmth. I wish to be home. I reach the window door. It is locked. The glass scratches slightly under my hand, cold and smooth. I press my weight against the door, push, but it doesn't move. I look down. A keyhole rusted tight. I try to peer through the window. The view is blurred by grime, but I can see a road, a building across from a parking lot. Street lights on that side hum faintly. This is part of a building under or behind something bigger. I step back, considering. There might be another exit. I walk back down the corridor. Somewhere behind me I hear a faint vibration, a distant motor, or maybe my heart. I can't tell. The corridor continues, thick shadows eating the midsection. I move forward carefully, hand against the wall. The light fades. My breath quickens. My pulse pounds. I tell myself I'm safe, that panic will only slow me down. I breathe deeply, match my footsteps to slow, steady breaths. In 2 out 2. At the corridor's midpoint, I find stairs descending. Narrow metal steps, worn, grated. They lead down into deeper darkness. I pause, telling myself I should leave, go back, maybe wait for help. But fear and thirst drive me onward. I step onto the stairs. My foot scrapes metal. I grip the railing. The staircase winds downward. I count steps, 10, 20, 30, my breathing ragged, my head spinning, each step echoing into the dark. My hand brushes against a damp wall, water trickling softly. The air shifts to colder, damper. I hear water again, drip drop somewhere below. At the bottom is a low ceiling chamber. I find another corridor, but this one narrower. The only light is faint, bouncing from cracks above. I walk forward. The ceiling slopes and the air smells like wet earth and mold. The ground slopes upward and I emerge into a larger, dimly lit area. Overhead, long fluorescent tubes flicker. A rusty generator stands in one corner with oily puddles beneath. The generator hums quietly, pistons moving. It casts a weak yellow light. The air smells of hot metal and oil. Near it, stacked crates and boxes form narrow passages. Here I feel more hope because I can see. I move toward the crates. My mind races. Maybe there's a way out hidden. I step off the concrete floor onto a pallet, with splinters under my foot. Boards are cracked. I climb slowly onto the crate stack. I am careful because they seem unstable. I climb higher, hands shaking. From this height I can see overhead ductwork, maybe a vent cover. It has screws. If I can reach it, maybe I can remove the cover. Climbing another couple of crates, I touch the metal cover. It is loose, but no tools. I pause. Panic creeps back. What if I can't open it? What if I break through and fall? But I have to try. I grip a crate edge with my foot, brace myself. My hands push and tug at the vent. It shifts. Under my fingers, small gaps appear. I jam a broken splinter between vent and wall. I angle it and push. Slowly the vent cover comes free. I feel cold air waft down, a breeze from outside. I've found an air duct. Desperation surges in me. I look down. Crates shift, one gives. I lose balance. I crash onto a smashed box below. I feel pain in my elbow, but I also feel adrenaline and victory. I push myself up, climb carefully again to the vent opening. I squeeze inside. The duct is tight and narrow. My arms brush the metal sides. Dust falls from the seam. My lungs strain for air. I breathe shallow and fast. I feel claustrophobic. but I force myself forward. I inch with hands and knees, the duct turning gradually. I taste the duct's stale metal. I hear my breathing and the hum of the generator far behind. I crawl until I reach a grate above. I pause in the dark tunnel above. Then I lift myself up and push. Light floods in daylight, bright and blinding at first. I shield my eyes. Outside is a rooftop. I'm on top of a low, flat commercial building. The air feels fresh and warm when it washes over me. I lie there, expelling breath I didn't know I was keeping. I realize I've climbed out. I sit up. The rooftop is quiet. Across from me is another rooftop with HVAC units. Beyond that, I see the skyline, city buildings, streetlights, maybe a few cars moving. I am high up, but I feel safe. I notice a fire escape ladder near me, scorched and aged. I climb carefully over the edge and drop onto the next roof. I climb the ladder down. My heart pounds, sweat mixes with dried dust. But I am upright, moving. I edge down until I find a stairwell exit door. I push it. It opens onto a stair landing. I am inside a stairwell, cleaner, brighter, familiar. Painted walls, stair treads, handrails. I descend, one step at a time. When I reach the ground floor, I step out into a parking garage. Fluorescent lights hum. I see a ramp leading up to the street. My legs feel like jelly, but I push forward. I climb the ramp and emerge onto pavement. I blink at the streetlight. I recognize the pavement, the graffiti, the corner of the bakery. I stagger forward, drawn toward lighted windows. I walk across the street, feeling concrete under my feet, fresh air filling my lungs, cold tile outside the bakery. A security guard sees me and rushes over. The door opens, bright light spills out. I see the street beyond, traffic passing, people late at night. I feel my body relax for the first time in who knows how long. I lean against the door frame. My head is throbbing, throat dry, hands shaking. But I am safe. The guard helps me inside. I am seated on a chair, given water, wrapped in a spare jacket. The fluorescent light is harsh but comforting. I taste cold water. It feels miraculous. My head clears a little with each sip. I scan the room. Tile floor, harsh lighting, papers on a desk, a constable helmet on a hook. I breathe in deeply, safe and alive. Later, an ambulance arrives for a quick check. No broken bones. No major injuries. Just exhaustion, dehydration, bruises. I close my eyes on a stretcher for a moment. When I wake, I am in